Ladies and gentlemen, the books is in. The books are in. Yep. They in. They're here. ETM Hotel Rennie Shawn. Welcome in peace. My name is Shawn. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to Science with Shawn. I'm not gonna keep y'all all day, man. Just a light little bill. I want to go over an actual lecture just share a lecture with everybody, man, to get them abreast to what mRNA vaccines are and how they operate. There's a lot of discussions going on right now, especially in the Black community, regarding the facts of should we take a vaccine or not. And a lot of that stems from our own ignorance because we don't know what's going on. Right under our noses is groundbreaking technology that is helping advance science to a level that that's allowing us to handle create a vaccine in the middle of a pandemic. And, they're doing tests right now. Now, the latest test result, the latest trials that are coming up are now focused on teens, 13, from the ages of 13 to 18. Right now, I think Moderna is leading the charge in trying to get, I think, 3,000 teenagers involved in trials. Now, that news was just made available to us today. And, you have some people that are in shambles about it because you saw a 16-year-old sister whose video was shared yesterday by Alcaket. And they were like, what's the long-term effects? Black people, what's the long-term effects? And I bet you she won't be able to have babies in the future. And, just a whole bunch of hogwash. And yes, sir, Sutek. And I feel like, we need to be more conscious of what's actually being said and what's actually going on revolving around the actual vaccines. So I want to share a lecture. I did it the other day on Kofi Paisai Research Team YouTube channel, a particular lecture that shedded some light on the situation, but I wanted to do something a little bit different on this one to bring people up on, just to bring y'all up on game. We'll speed it up and let y'all know what's actually going on. I don't want to play on people's ignorance. I actually am a big fan of this actual vaccine, the mRNA, because it's all based off the molecular structure of the genome, right? Once they map out or they get the genetic sequencing of the actual vaccine, it allows them to be able to go in there and mess with the coding and structure the vaccine according to the genetic sequencing of the actual pathogen, and then they can make a vaccine a lot faster, a lot safer, and a lot more convenient. For instance, when they mapped out the genome regarding the COVID-19 virus, right? SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 is how I want to say this to keep y'all abreast, because everybody just think COVID-19 is this, that, and third. The disease, SARS-CoV-2 is the disease. COVID-19 is the virus, right? So y'all get what I'm saying. Anyway, all my science heads is in the building. Peace to all of y'all, man. Appreciate y'all tuning in. I have on the Mossi Warrior Clan channel. But anyway, long story short, So you have a disease and you have a virus, right? All right. Now, with the mRNA, the vaccine is safer. It does not contain the virus. Now, people are like all up in arms. How is this gonna work if it don't have like the dead virus, or even in piece of COVID-19 in it, right? People are like, what the hell? What's going on? This ain't even feasible, right? This is what they're saying. It's not feasible. Well, they just made it safer because they don't need the strand inside the vaccine. But what are they using? They're using you'll hear it in a minute. I don't want to give it all away, but you'll hear what it is. Because if you don't know before, like pretty much your cells and molecules are a big deal regarding mRNA, and it's the safest way. And then people be like, well, it's gonna alter my DNA. No, it's not gonna alter your DNA. That is also false information. But before we get started, I'm just trying to show a little bit. And then let me see, I can bring Brother Suit taking this giant. Wow, he gotta do it. Just hop on if he want to. But let me see if I can get Brother Suit Tech in. Cause I know he up late. He was with me on the last one. And I don't want to talk everybody to death, so just give me 1 second. And maybe Brother Nahisi, if he ain't busy. And also again, man, everybody, had Kofi on your hearts, minds, and thoughts, man. Kofi has shed some light on this situation on Facebook, and he appreciated everybody's support regarding, his situation and what he's been going through. Good news. It's a bittersweet, but it's some good news on the other side of that, especially with what has transpired regarding his son and the family and all of that, man. So just continue to keep Bro Kofi on your hearts and minds, and let's get everybody in here. But again, we're gonna get into a little bit about the vaccine because I was on live and a brother had said something, and then they had questions about mRNA, and then when you try to give them the information, of course, they ain't even trying to deal with it from that perspective. They just rather have an actual belief, but then they want to attack, like everybody else who hold on to certain beliefs, and through your ignorance, you get this type of stuff that actually transpires. So I'm gonna share my screen, and if the brother pop in, I'll be able to guide it back and grab him, and I'm gonna get right to it. Let's learn something.
From the JAMA Network, this is Conversations with Dr. Bachner. Interviews featuring researchers and thinkers in healthcare about their publications in the latest issue of JAMA.
Good morning and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Bachner. It's Howard Bachner once again. I'm joined by Paul Offit. Paul's a physician, Maurice Hillman, professor of vaccinology at Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, a world-renowned vaccine expert, much in the news recently. And Paul's here to talk about the recent advisory committee meeting, the Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee meeting that was held last week. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Howard.
So, Paul, before we get to the meeting, I have already mentioned that I wanted to talk about two other issues that really have been in the news every day. The first is the large number of cases. Tony Fauci's been on, Bob Redfield's been on. So many people have been so concerned about the winter months. It's gotten cold quickly. 60, 70,000 cases a day. Death rate's still lowish in comparison to the total number of cases, but hospitals are filling up, as are ICUs. Is this what we have to face for the next 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months? Paul, what's your sense?
Yes, this is what everybody always feared. And although the death rates aren't currently up, with hospitalizations and ICU rates up, you can assume deaths will follow. One would have imagined when it first raised its head in Wuhan that this is an envelope virus, a respiratory virus like flu, like paraflu, like RSV, that would be worse in the winter months and then would abate in the summer months. I think what surprised me, and I think a lot of people, was that this envelope virus spread by small droplets actually still raged in the summer months in hot and humid climates like Florida, Texas, Arizona. But I think everybody expected what's going to happen now. Worse, this will also face to some extent a flu epidemic, as we do every year. And now it may be that with masking and social distancing, we'll have a lesser flu epidemic than typically, but it's definitely going to be a twin-demic now, which wasn't true last year.
Paul, over the weekend, Tony, for the first time, talked about national legislation around masking, something the White House has really resisted. Scott Gottlieb had a piece yesterday in the Wall Street Journal supporting that. Are we there? Is that where we need to go to, national mandate on masking?
To say that the White House has resisted national masking is a nice way to say it. I mean, they've done everything they can to downplay the importance of mask or social distancing. It's the only thing we have, and arguably the most powerful thing we have. I mean, I was on service last week. There were patients we saw who either had or were suspected of having COVID-19. If you gave me three choices of what to do, I could either be 6 feet away from that patient, or if I couldn't be 6 feet away, I could either wear a mask or get a vaccine. Number one, 6 feet away. Number two, if I have to be close to the person, wear a mask. Number three, get a vaccine. Assuming a vaccine is about 75% effective, a mask worn correctly is more effective than that. So masking is really an important thing to do. The problem is I think the nature of this country. We sort of were founded on individual rights and freedoms. People say it's my freedom not to wear a mask. Or said another way, it's my freedom to catch and transmit a potentially fatal virus, which it isn't. But I just think it's very hard in this country to enforce it and get people to do it. But at the very least, the president and vice president who have a platform, who've been given a tremendous platform, can at least demonstrate good behavior, which they refuse to do.
I don't know all the amendments, but I can't remember an amendment that somehow protected the right not to mask. We both are chuckling about it. But, we managed with seatbelts, okay? We finally convinced everyone, none of my friends, none of my children would ever get in a car and not put a seatbelt on. And somehow masking has taken on an entirely different life of its own.
Yeah, it's become a political statement. I think this is probably the only country in the world where masking is a political statement. It's been hard to watch.
Now, I know we want to get to vaccines, but the other issue that's come up, and you and I chatted just briefly about it before, is the so-called Great Barrington Manifesto and then the Snowden document response. Some have said the White House has embraced it. Let everyone become infected, protect the elderly, protect the most vulnerable, and you get to herd immunity. Comments?
Yeah, I think the White House has embraced. The White House doesn't have a plan. So now suddenly herd immunity induced by natural infection has become the plan. Right. But the premise is wrong. The premise is that a virus can affect enough people in the population that would provide immunity such that essentially the virus would put itself out of business. That's never happened. That's never happened for any virus. So historically, there's no support for it. Secondly, if you had to pick the perfect virus for which it would happen, it would be measles. I mean, measles is 10 times more contagious than this virus, than SARS-CoV-2. It has an R0 contagiousness index of close to 20, whereas this is less than 2. Two, measles induces lifelong sterilizing immunity. You are protected against all manner of infection, including asymptomatic infection. And that's not going to be this virus. And nonetheless, despite that, before there was a measles vaccine, every year there would be about 1 to 2 million cases of measles. There'd be 50,000 hospitalizations, and there'd be 500 deaths from measles. So there's no such thing as this Great Barrington Declaration. Plus, about 30% to 40% of the population is really at high risk.
Right.
Greater than 65, obese. I mean, are we all supposed to stay indoors for the next couple of years while we're doing this? It just doesn't make a bit of sense.
Right. So let's turn to vaccines. I have a list of questions, but I wanted to give you a chance to summarize what you thought were the key exchanges between you and the FDA and the committee. That's so if you could comment. But the other thing is some of the committee members do have conflicts of interest because they consult to different companies. Have they been excluded from these meetings? I just wanted to clarify that for our listeners because it's a big issue.
3 voting members were excluded from this meeting because they either were consulting to a company or they were on the data safety monitoring board for a company.
The key exchanges. What do you think the key exchanges were, Paul, from the meeting last week?
I think the tension in this meeting was this. These are not going to be licensed products. They are going to be essentially permitted for use under emergency use authorization. And permission is the right word. It's the same that would be given to, say, an investigational new drug. Permission is being given to vaccinate 150 million Americans initially, which is obviously something we've never dealt with before. And I think that when the public hears, or frankly the medical community hears the word emergency use authorization, they think correctly of hydroxychloroquine, which was approved or permitted through emergency use authorization when there were no data suggesting that it worked. And now there's clear data that shows that it didn't work to either treat or prevent the disease. And so the FDA then withdrew its permission through EUA. 10% of people who got that drug could have, cardiac toxicity, specifically arrhythmias. Then you had the convalescent plasma fiasco. Again, no data showing that it worked, and nonetheless, that was permitted for use. So I think that's what people hear. They hear emergency use authorization for vaccines, and therefore vaccines are going to be allowed to be used with the same flimsy or lack of evidence for these other two products. But that said, the trials that are being done for these vaccines are typical of any licensed product. I mean, Pfizer's doing a 44,000 person trial, Moderna's a 30,000 person trial, Johnson & Johnson's a 60,000 person trial. That's like any licensed product. So why not do this as a licensure? Why not submit a biological license application and then license these vaccines by the method we always do that, and drop the phrase emergency use authorization? And the reason is, and I mean, for example, the human papillomavirus vaccine trial was a 30,000 person trial. Our rotavirus vaccine trial, the RotaTeq trial, was a 70,000 person trial. The conjugate pneumococcal vaccine was a 35,000 person trial. The difference between those trials and these trials was length of study. So the HPV vaccine was a 7-year study. I mean, our rotavirus vaccine, RotaTeq, was a 4-year study. This, at most, will be a 6-month study. And the FDA would never license a vaccine with only 6 months of data. Not so much so for safety, because really with safety, they just want 2 months after the last dose. I mean, even for diseases like Guillain-Barré syndrome, you would see that within 6 weeks of getting a dose. So it's not safety so much, it's efficacy. I think you just can't license something with that little efficacy data. And if you put a vaccine out there with only 6 months of efficacy data, or frankly, it would be less than that, more like 3, 4, 5 months of efficacy data, I just think that you may be unpleasantly surprised that it is either very short-lived or not as robust as you imagine. So that's the problem. You have some people have now said, well, we'll just do these studies for 2 years. But on the other side, 225,000 people have died of this virus. I mean, with HPV, 5,000 people died a year. With rotavirus, 60 people died a year. So that's the tension, is how much uncertainty are we willing to live with, knowing that we're facing a virus that's brought us to our knees.
Paul, can we just go back to the safety? Because I did listen to and read snippets of the meeting, the 2-month safety data, and a statement that side effects like Guillain-Barré in the past have shown up generally within 2 months. That's with traditional vaccines. These are novel vaccines. Is there broad agreement that you would expect side effects or adverse events like Guillain-Barré to show up within 2 months, given that these are novel vaccines? I do worry that the public may not believe that 2 months is sufficient safety data. What's your sense of that, Paul?
So Stanley Perlman actually was brought in as a temporary voting member, and his expertise is in coronavirus immunology. Okay. And he argued that vaccine-induced immune pathology that was seen, for example, in animal models with SARS-CoV-1, in animal models for MERS, that you would think you would need about 4 months to see that. But if you look back at something like the measles vaccine, the inactivated measles vaccine that was brought into the United States in 1963 was found to actually cause this sort of unusual atypical measles, which actually increased your risk of pneumonia. You had an unusual rash. It really took a few years to figure that out. So I think you're right. I mean, you have in this virus, SARS-CoV-2, this unusual virus that has already caused a number of clinical and pathological changes you would not have expected, which we are now meeting with vaccine strategies that have pretty much no commercial experience. I mean, I think we are going to have a learning curve here. The question is how much pain you need to live with in the meantime. I mean, so for example, that person in Brazil who died during, I think it was Johnson & Johnson's trial. When we heard that there was a death in a vaccine trial, everybody held their breath. And then we're able to breathe a sigh of relief when we realized that it was someone in the placebo group. Well, because he was in the placebo group, that's probably why he died of COVID-19. I mean, but for the flip of a coin, he ended up in the wrong group. I mean, I
want y'all to understand what he just said. This dude was a part of a trial. He received the placebo, not the vaccine. He received the placebo and not the vaccine, and he actually caught the disease. I mean, the virus. The disease that causes the virus. He actually caught it. He ended up with COVID-19 and he died. So they panicked. And then when they went back to their research and communicated about it, they realized after speaking to the doctors and, the scientists all got together, they realized that this dude was given the placebo. And he actually died of the disease. The man is telling you right then and there. Let's go.
Had he been in the vaccine group. And so that's always the tension.
So you heard him. You know what I'm saying? Had he been in the vaccine group, he wouldn't have died. This is the risk that we're taking every day when we come into contact with other people and we're having problems not understanding the seriousness of COVID-19. Some of us are asymptomatic, not all of us. Some of us will have some type of reaction to it. My best friend had it. That's as close as it has gotten to me. Is that my best friend contracted it. And he was by himself suffering for at least 2 weeks. I go out of town. He takes himself to the emergency room a third time. And he's saying they're going to keep him. And he needed stuff. And we made sure that he got what he needed. And, he talked to us after it. And then, he was on the backside of it. But it was the worst experience he had had. It started in his head. He was having massive headaches. He couldn't keep his eyes open. He said it took him hours to get to the bathroom. And if you've ever been to his house, he's got a master bedroom, so it's not too far to get to his bathroom from in his room. Everything took forever for him. And he just couldn't do anything. So it was tough. He couldn't keep nothing down. He said couldn't taste anything. He said the worst part of it is he just felt like his breath stunk the whole time. He brushed his teeth so much he didn't know what to do. It was a whole lot. And he went through that and he dealt with all of those stages and all of those phases. And then if you have pre-existing conditions, like, you know what I mean? It's one thing and another. And then I hear, and I hope my sister's not watching this, but you know what I'm saying? My sister has come in contact with it. And I'm a little on edge about that because it's my sister. And, with her situations and everything that she has going on, I hope that she's able to get the care and everything that she needs, and, quarantining would work out well for her, and that people would just appreciate and respect her space and not come into contact with her. And I hope all of that, works out. I'm really nervous about my sister. But that's that on that. But you know what I'm saying? So let's keep going. We building.
And we're working with here.
If you lengthen the efficacy data out to 6 months, then you do gain safety data for 6 months.
That's right. True.
So, I mean, if you match them together, then you gain much more information about safety. Now, what's the process? You have this discussion last week. How does David Mark and his group at the FDA then take it in? Because Moderna has said they're going to qualify for an EUA in November, December. You and I talked about it beforehand. I prefer they stop making that statement. They have no idea if they'll qualify for an EUA. That's not up to them. They will apply for an EUA. I think some of the other companies have been more appropriate in their statements that we are warming up. We will apply for an EUA in November, December. Moderna said they'll get one. I don't know how they know that. Does the FDA now think about what your recommendations or suggestions were about letting the efficacy data go for another 2, 3, 4 months before they think about an EUA, or to approve it as a normal biologic product?
I think what the FDA wanted to get from this advisory committee was what we thought about this EUA, the way that it's currently set up. And I think where the rubber's going to meet the road here is how we handle these interim analyses. So the first interim analyses will be when 34 participants get sick. The second interim analysis will be around 60, when 60 get sick. But I really do think that the NIH active group that was put together by Francis Collins, when Peter Gilbert and other statisticians put together what they wanted from these trials, they wanted basically, at least if the trial was going to be 2 vaccine to 1 placebo, 2 to 1 that ratio, they wanted at least 147 participants to get sick, which then with at least a 90% confidence interval, you could say it was effective at 50 or 60% effectiveness. And if it was going to be a 1-to-1, they wanted at least 160 people. I'd like to think that we are going to be really loath to approve this or to recommend approval through emergency use authorization with just 34 or 60 participants getting sick.
There's a couple questions have come in. I want to return to 1 or 2 of the other kind of ethical issues that have come up, like do people in the placebo group get active vaccine, and then does that create follow-up problems? But let's put that aside. JAMA published the article about the more traditional vaccine from China, which my sources tell me has actually now been used in many hundreds of thousands of individuals. And then no one really knows much about the Russian vaccine. Can you comment on either the Chinese vaccine that we published on or the Russian vaccine? Do you have much knowledge about them?
Well, I know how they're constructed. What I don't know, though, is what the results of the phase 3 studies are.
Right.
I know the Chinese have given this to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. That's an activated vaccine. Russia has this replication defective. Initially, it's 2 different viruses. One is a replication defective human adenovirus type 5, followed by a dose of replication defective human adenovirus type 26, which they've now actually sent to Venezuela for use. So again, there's a certain nationalism to this. You can see where countries will then provide vaccine to their allies as well as their own citizens. So I think there's going to be a nationalism overlay to all this. But it's not that hard to do phase 3 studies. Let's see what the phase 3 studies show.
Do you have any sense that either the Russian or Chinese vaccines that they'll apply for approval either through the FDA or the EMA are not likely?
I think the FDA generally has been loath to approve vaccines for American citizens that haven't been tested in Americans historically.
So then let's go on to some of the ethical questions that did come up. So, for example, you'll have 150 or 200,000 individuals in the 3 major trials. Half will have been assigned to placebo. You then approve the drug either through an EUA or the traditional process. The placebo recipients, are they first up for the vaccine?
Pfizer actually made an announcement that if they go through an EUA, they're going to vaccinate the placebo group. That obviously upset the FDA. Marion Gruber actually talked to us at that meeting and had 2 slides that specifically said, realize that under an EUA, you are under no obligation to provide vaccine to the placebo group. The problem with that is, and here's the tension. On the one hand, you could understand how, for example, someone who's over 65 that now sees a vaccine that, let's say, is 60% effective, could say, look, I want that vaccine. It's now approved, at least through this mechanism. I want this vaccine. On the other hand, if you eliminate now placebo groups going forward, you're not going to learn about these other vaccines in nearly the same manner you would. And let's make the assumption, which I think is not a large assumption, that the first vaccine is not going to be necessarily the last best vaccine, either with regard to safety or efficacy. How are you going to know that? If you have a vaccine initially that's 50% effective, and then down the line there's a vaccine that's 80 to 90% effective, how are you going to learn that? And that is the history of vaccines. I mean, the first vaccine that comes out is invariably not the last best vaccine. So that's what I think is worrying people.
Cody Meisner, you're a pediatrician. I'm a pediatrician. Cody's on the committee. He brought up the issue of children. I mean, your lifelong commitment has been to vaccinology in general, but more specifically in children. How's that going to play out with respect to children and young adults? Do you have a sense of that yet, Paul?
Cody was concerned, Dr. Meisner was concerned that we have this MIS-C disease in children. And the concern is that this SARS-CoV-2 spike protein is acting as sort of this super antigen that induces this multi-system inflammatory response. And that we're not going to get around that by vaccines that essentially cause your body to make SARS-CoV-2 spike protein and then make antibodies to the spike protein. I actually don't feel that way. I think that that's unlikely to happen. And in either case, I think On the one hand, you could argue that people less than 21 years of age account for roughly 26% of the population, but only 0.08% of the deaths. Clearly, children get this virus less frequently, and when they get it less severely. But they do get it, and they can die from it at a little less than the rate that they die from influenza, for which we also immunize them. So I do think that we are going to need a vaccine for children. I do think eventually we're going to need to test the vaccine in children before we give it to them. I think one of the concerns by the committee was, do we really need to test them, or can we do immunobridging studies? In other words, if we have an immunological correlate, and if you make this level of neutralizing antibodies,
Right.
we say that if children can make this level of neutralizing antibodies, that's good enough. There were some members of the committee that thought that immunobridging was fine, others that didn't. So that's yet another tension.
Crystal ball, the presidential election is next week. It's on Tuesday. Hopefully by Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, we will know who is president. Now that's early November. And then an EUA is filed in late November or early December by one of the 3 or 4 companies. If President Trump is reelected, how do you think it will play out?
I'm choosing to believe, and maybe I'm naive in this, that this process is not going to be subject to the same sort of political influence that hydroxychloroquine and convalescent plasma were, for the main reason being that the first 2 were treatments. This is a preventive measure that most of the people who are going to be getting this vaccine are healthy young people who are unlikely to die from this virus. There's already enormous resistance and skepticism about this vaccine. I think people are going to wait for a clear message that this vaccine is safe and effective before they get it. And even then, I think even people that are educated about this vaccine may wait for the first few million doses to get out there before they can feel more comfortable getting this vaccine.
That's many of my relatives. I will be, I mean, they keep asking me, will I get vaccinated? I'll go, well, I have good sources of information about safety, but many of my friends and relatives have said they'll wait. They're not excited about going first. Hopefully you're right. I do think the scientific community, and I've been very impressed with Steve and David about their insistence about a scientific process, not subject to interference by the White House. So let's say an application comes in for an EUA in November, December. At that point, you will actually see data. Is it at that point that you would recommend, please do not approve the EUA? Please go to the normal process, wait another 4 months for data? What actually happens when an EUA is submitted to the FDA?
All right, before he continues, I want to talk about something that he actually just said about people not wanting to be the first. There's already the first. There's 40,000 by one group, 60,000 by another group, 20,000 by another group, or maybe even more of people already, diversity of people that have already taken either A, the vaccine, B, the placebo in these phase 3 trials. So after they come out of the phase 3 trials, and these EUAs are approved, which we've just, we've witnessed that they are approved now, then people will start getting the vaccine, and they are still not the first. They still are not the first. Now, people's misunderstanding and the reason why is because we've had Mr. Alternative Facts in the White House, and then this has been the last 4 years have been the age of misinformation, ignorance, and pseudoscience, and it has plagued us and made us dumb. It dumbed us down, especially Black people who already had their own pseudo perspectives regarding vaccines due to something that they always like to bring up that supposedly had to happen in the past, and that's the Tuskegee experiment, because we've been miseducated and miseducated and misinformed on what actually took place during the Tuskegee experiment. And then we think the government is always out to get us, trick us, or treat us any kind of way. But yet we pay them for our water, lights, gas, cars, rents, all the things with cell phones. Your cell phone can be loaded up with a virus and kill you. Have you thought about that? I'm just playing, but it could explode. You know what I mean? They can build, some people's phones have exploded before. Because I think those iPhones at one time, they took them off the market where the battery would get too hot. And if it's close to your ear, it explode. And it has happened. I don't think y'all gonna act like that never happened. You see what I'm saying? Y'all gonna do that? Like you gonna drive a car down the street doing 100 miles an hour, then slam on the brakes, and what if the brakes don't work? They go out. And all you looking at is a brick wall. And you ain't got your seatbelt on because you don't care nothing about that either. You know what I mean? So let's not play games with that. Let's just be serious. But anyway, let's hear what he says about this. We'll get into more about mRNA vaccines. I actually have 2 good articles up that's convenient to build on top of this. But I just wanted to bring y'all, the awareness. And this is actually a nice little 25-minute Q&A.
The committee.
I think that the ship has sailed on this. I don't think that there's enough will among the committee to say we're not buying into this EUA process. We want to wait for biological license application and licensure process. That was the result of that last meeting. We had disagreements about what we required for an EUA, but that there was going to be an EUA was clear. So that's not going to change. And I think in order to get a true license, they would really need to do this study for a couple of years.
Okay.
And that's just not going to happen. So the question then is what level we're going to accept as enough people that are participants that have gotten sick that we then are comfortable saying, let's go. One story about this, because I think it is relevant, even though it's an old one, but I'm an old person. The polio vaccine in 1955, there are mirrors to that vaccine. I mean, one is that a lot of the transmission was from people who were asymptomatically infected that you didn't know about. That's actually the main reason it was transmitted. Jonas Salk did his studies in Pittsburgh. He inoculated 700 people, found that this inactivated vaccine was great at inducing an immune response and appeared safe. But we waited for a phase 3 trial. Waited for that phase 3 trial. It was 420,000 children got vaccine, 200,000 children got placebo, and it worked. And Thomas Francis stood up at Rackham Hall and said, safe, potent, and effective. And that headline was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. Well, the question is, how did he know it was effective? The reason we knew it was effective was that 16 children died of polio in that study, all in the placebo group. Of the 36 children that got paralyzed in that study, 34 were in the placebo group. I mean, those were first and second graders who, by the flip of a coin, ended up either dying or being permanently paralyzed. Many of those people would be alive today. I was a first and second grader in the 1950s. I mean, that could have been me. My parents didn't volunteer me for that trial, but that's how you learn that something's.
You see that? The children's trial. This is why they didn't just jump out the gate with the children, because they learned from the past with the polio vaccine. When they ran the trials on the polio vaccine, you just heard the man talk about kids dying or becoming paralyzed and all these other things. And then the other kids who actually got it, nothing actually transpired from that. That's how I did it. I'm going to run it back because polio is real. And I want y'all to listen to this dude.
34 were in the placebo group. I mean, those were first and second graders who, by the flip of a coin, ended up either dying or being permanently paralyzed. Many of those people would be alive today. I was a first and second grader in the 1950s. I mean, that could have been me. My parents didn't volunteer me for that trial, but that's how you learn that something's effective. And just realize that when we're talking about 250,000 people having died roughly from this virus this year, and it's only going to get worse, I think, moving forward, that's the price you pay for learning something's effective.
An old colleague of mine who you know very well, Jerry Klein, tells the story about when they opened up the envelope about the H flu type B vaccine, and all the cases were in the unvaccinated group, and he knew that they were looking at saving the lives of upwards of 10,000 children a year. I forgot what the number was, 10-1 or 9-0. He realized that they had a life-saving vaccine. I want to turn, and I don't know how much the committee focused on it, more and more is coming to the attention of what logistics is going to look like. The National Academy of Medicine and ACIP, we've published papers from both of those groups. It's very clear the first 20 million doses are going to go to the large community of healthcare workers. And most of that will be distributed through hospitals. I'm generally comfortable thinking that hospitals, regardless of what temperature the vaccine needs to be kept at or how quickly it needs to be administered, that hospitals are capable of doing it. But you are a pediatrician, and you know how complicated it is to ship, store, administer, and track vaccines. What's your sense of where we are on the next 100 million people? Not the first 20 million, where I do think it will be hospital-based and we will be capable and competent at it. It's the next 100 million, Paul. Do you have a sense of that?
I think it's going to be a real challenge, not just the shipping and storing at -70, which means making sure that the dry ice is constantly replenished, something we've never done in this country for a vaccine before. It also means identifying who those people are that are in that second wave, meaning other essential workers and people who are over 65 and people who have certain health problems. How do you identify them? How do you make sure they come back roughly a month later? Some vaccines are as 21 days later, and other vaccines 29 days later. It's going to be hard. And do you give this to large chain pharmacies? Is that how you do it? Or you just sort of set it up as in the same way that we have set up testing centers, that you just have these individual special purpose centers that you set up to do this who are only doing this? I don't know. It's not going to be the federal government that decides. I think it's going to be at the state and local level that this happens.
The reason I'm so concerned about it is I went and got my vaccine at one of the local pharmacies. But they need to track who I am. It needs to go into my EHR. I need to get a second dose. If I have an adverse effect, someone needs to know which vaccine I got and on what day.
Let me stop. Because people say asking how they gonna track it, keep track, how they gonna know who got what, when, where, and why. He just broke it down like I've been telling people. They have tools set up for them to be able to monitor if you have adverse effects, which vaccine you had, and where you got it, because your doctor or the person responsible for administering the vaccine has to input this information into a data system that scientists and doctors alike are monitoring these things. So they can know what's doing what, to whom, and where. And if you have an adverse effect, was it because of the vaccine or was it because of something else? You need to know that the mRNA vaccine does not contain this virus. So what would be the actual adverse effects? We're going to know more about that next week. So next week, we're going to do Science with Shawn again. Next week, because if we get the reports back that are made public on the 8th, and all the journals get to publishing their finds, we will have it. It's going to be public record. There might be a whole lot of stuff to get through, but we can look at the methodology used. We understand the methodology because we all know most of us know what a double-blind placebo, know what these trials are, what's required in those trials. Let me just slow it down. What's required in those trials, what they go through to get the results, and how that looks. So next week, we're going to know even more information. But let's go ahead and listen to this, brother. Go ahead.
And we don't have the most efficient healthcare, public health, electronic health record system in the U.S. It's very discombobulated, and that's what's making me nervous about the logistics. And then the last is, it appears as though McKesson is going to be the primary shipper, and I have yet to hear how they're going to distribute it to the 50 states. And we know that we ran into tremendous problems around remdesivir, and I know there's already concern that the monoclonals will go to the people who can pay for it. So again, I think those are the details that are coming across my desk and people are concerned about.
It's going to be a learning curve associated with this. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stumbling. And looking back, we'll see ways in which we could have done this a lot better.
Paul, when's the committee meet next?
Unknown. We were asked to agree to 3 dates in November and 3 dates in December that we would set aside then, with the presumption that one or more of these companies are going to be submitting for an EUA and that we're going to need to meet ad hoc to discuss that. So I think in the next couple of months, we are going to be seeing companies submitting for this. If dreams can come true, all I ask is this: let's have at least 150 participants that got sick. That's all I ask.
Paul, you've been an extraordinary guest on Conversations. You've been on many shows. On behalf of the medical community and the public, I just personally really want to thank you. I think you've really tried to educate people about vaccines, acknowledging how restless people are about them, restless about the pandemic in general and the vaccines. And I think it's people like you speaking with clarity and experience that can help to reassure the American populace that when we get to a vaccine, it will be approved because it is safe and it's effective. So on behalf of the medical community, I really want to thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Nice to say that. Thank you.
So this is Howard Bachner. It's been Conversations with Dr. Bachner. I've been talking to Paul Offit, the Maurice Hillman Professor of Vaccinology at Perelman School of Medicine, University of Pennsylvania, and I must add a pediatrician, a fellow pediatrician. Thank.
All right, so he just let you know that the guy's qualified to speak on this subject matter. All right, so let's get into mRNA again, because most people are not really privy to what an mRNA vaccine is. All right, so this is a new approach to vaccines. mRNA vaccines take advantage of the process that cells, remember I said this earlier, cells use to make proteins. I didn't want to be too specific because I knew I would get back to this. Cells to make proteins in order to trigger an immune response and build immunity to SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. I be messing this up all the way. I be talking about the disease and the virus. I always mess it up. All right, so let me just get it right here. Now, watch what it says. In contrast, most vaccines use weakened or inactivated versions of components of the disease causing the pathogen to stimulate the body's immune response to create antibodies. Most vaccines use weakened or inactivated versions. mRNA, it ain't built like that. Why? mRNA vaccines have strands of genetic material called mRNA inside of special coating. That coating protects the mRNA from enzymes in the body that would otherwise break it down. It also helps the mRNA to enter the muscle cells near the vaccination site. mRNA can most easily be described as instructions for the cell on how to make a piece of the spike protein that is unique to SARS-CoV-2. Now, since the only part of the protein is made, it does not do any harm to the person vaccinated, but it is antigenic. After the piece of the spike protein is made, the cell breaks down the mRNA strand and disposes of them using enzymes in the cell. It is important to note that the mRNA strand never enters the cell's nucleus or affects genetic material. This information helps counter misinformation about how mRNA vaccines alter or modify someone's genetic makeup. Once displayed on the cell surface, the protein of the antigen causes the immune system to begin producing antibodies and activating T cells to fight off what it thinks is the infection. These antibodies are specific to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which means the immune response is primed to protect against future infections. All right. I'm looking in the chat real quick. If y'all lost, man, say you lost. We can walk it back. If you lost, let us know. We'll walk it back. So again, SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, the disease. The disease. mRNA is a safer way. Here's the benefits. It's a safer way. It takes shorter time to manufacture this. We went through a video with this the other day, so I don't want to elaborate too much. Just go on Coffee Pie side if you want to know more research. Think about it this way. your car, the engine oil you use in your car, depending on what year it is, they use crude oil or used to use crude oil. You buy a $50,000 or $60,000 car today, it's going to use synthetic oil, man-made oil, right? There's a difference between crude oil and man-made oil. Synthetic oil, when it's going through the system, is tricking the system, making them think that it's crude oil being used, but it's not. Look at mRNA as the pump fake, like synthetic oil is to an engine. Except for we talking about an engine and comparing it to a human being. I understand that, but I'm only just trying to draw a parallel showing you how technology has advanced engine oil and how technology has also now brought forth, well, I already been in the works, but brought forth a safer way to become vaccinated. All right. Hold on, let me go back real quick. Because there's something else in here I want y'all to kind of hear about, because you heard people mentioning this a lot, talking about herd immunity and all of that, like a sound strategy. I'm not going to play all of this, just a little bit of it.
From the JAMA Network, this is Conversations with Dr. Bachner. Interviews featuring researchers and thinkers in healthcare about their publications in the latest issue of JAMA.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Bachner. Once again, it is Howard Bachner, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA. And I'm delighted to be joined by two remarkable individuals today. Mark Lifsit is a professor of epidemiology, very prominent nationally and internationally. An epidemiologist. He's a professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the Harvard T.C. Chan School of Public Health. Welcome, Mark. Mark's been on before, and I appreciate him coming on again.
Thank you.
The other individual on today is Jay Bhattacharya. Jay's a senior fellow at the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, and he's a professor of medicine at Stanford. And we're here to discuss what has emerged as probably one of the most fascinating yet challenging discussions in modern infectious disease epidemiology in the last 20 or 30 years. A few weeks ago, Jay, with two colleagues and then a number of other signatories, published what has now become the Great Barrington Declaration. Mark and many other colleagues, in response, signed on to what was called the John Snow rebuttal. So I'm going to start by asking Jay to describe what the Great Barrington Declaration is and why it was called the Great Barrington Declaration, and then ask Mark to talk about the John Snow rebuttal. But before I start, I just want to remind people of the most recent data. About 100,000 infections a day or more in the United States, record highs. Deaths, though, much lower in terms of the ratio, 100,000 to 1,000 deaths. At the height of the struggles in New York, New Jersey, it was about 20,000 cases a day, but much closer to 2,000 or 3,000 deaths. So that ratio has changed, and people are very aware of that. But I think the great concern is whether the hospital systems in the U.S. will get overwhelmed. We're approaching 50,000 admissions or hospital patient days each day, and that is a real issue. Now, the difference is that the outbreak is almost in every state, so that varies. And then the last piece of data I'll mention is the size of the U.S. population that has potentially been infected with COVID-19 remains somewhat uncertain. An estimate by the CDC a few months ago was somewhere around 10 or 12%. Whether it's 15% now is unknown, but that would be 15% of 360 million people. And those data become important when you talk about herd immunity. Jay, I'll turn it over to you, the Great Barrington Declaration.
Thanks, Howard. So I think let me just start very quickly with the premises of the Declaration. The first premise is that there's not possible to get zero COVID. That is an impossible goal, and we should give that up. At this point, the disease is so widespread that zero COVID would be utterly disastrous to even attempt to achieve, and it's not technically possible. A second premise is that I think everyone will agree that this is an absolutely deadly disease for people who are older and for people who have certain chronic conditions. The infection survival rate from seroprevalence data, now 50 some high quality seroprevalence studies, says that there's a 95% survival rate for people who are 70 and older. For people under 70, it's 99.95% survival. It's much less deadly for people who are under 70, 99.95. And for children, it's frankly, the flu is worse. We've had more flu deaths among children this year than COVID deaths, just in terms of mortality. Third premise is that lockdowns have absolutely catastrophic effects on physical and mental health of populations, both domestically and internationally. We'll talk about that, I think, going forward. But that really sort of plays a big role in the thinking about the Great Barrington Declaration. So that for people who are under 70, under say 60 or 50, the lockdown harms are, again, mentally and physically, are worse than COVID. And then finally, the vaccine's coming no matter what we do, whether we adopt more lockdowns like Europe has, or we do a focused protection plan like the Great Barrington Declaration says. The vaccine is coming, and it will help no matter what when it comes, right? So between, my colleagues like to say 6 months and never, but it seems like we made a lot of progress. Okay, so the only question is, what do we do until the vaccine comes? And so the Great Barrington Declaration is actually a call to return to sort of principles that we've had followed for many, many other infectious disease outbreaks. We protect the vulnerable with every single tool we have. We use our testing resources. We use our staff rotations on nursing homes. We use PPE. We do all kinds of things so that where people live that are vulnerable, and that older people are mainly the main group, but also many other people with chronic conditions, we can talk about strategies to do that. We do that. That's why it's called focused protection. For younger populations and people who are less at risk, frankly, COVID is less of a risk than the lockdowns. And for them, letting them go back to normal life, again, with taking precautions as necessary, it's not let or rip like some people mischaracterize, but opening schools, for instance, is absolutely vital. Opening universities, letting people go back to the normal activity they would do that would prevent the lockdown harms is vital. So those are the basic ideas of the Great Barrington Declaration and the premises.
Jay, why was it called the Great Barrington Declaration? Just out of curiosity.
So it was Sunetra Gupta, Martin Kulldorff, and I met in Great Barrington.
They can't protect their healthcare system because they can't protect the vulnerable. In the United States, less than 10% of nursing home residents get tested within 24 hours, as is recommended by infection control professionals. And therefore, nursing home outbreaks have geographically followed the widespread tools to protect the vulnerable without control.
I'm fast forwarding because I want to get to a particular point.
It makes.
Jay, when you hear Mark's comment, and I'm sure you've read the John Snow memorandum, that logistically, this simply is not possible in a country of 360 million, testing relatively still unavailable in certain places, a tremendous amount of political discord. Do you think it is logistically possible?
Let me start by noting a couple of things. Like one, that the lockdowns themselves have created intermixing between the vulnerable and non-vulnerable. They've essentially caused economic dislocation where young people have moved back in with parents. They've closed universities, sent young people to live back home, and created situations where this kind of mixing where vulnerable people would be exposed has occurred. The lockdowns have also they're not like universal lockdowns. We've asked essentially poor people, minorities, urban workers, even vulnerable ones, older ones, a 63-year-old bus driver, a Costco clerk, 60-year-old Costco clerk with diabetes, to go work and expose themselves. Lockdowns themselves, in fact, create vulnerable people and put them in places where they are going to be at risk. Let me take another tack at the premises. The premises of the Great Barrington Declaration, contrary to what Mark just said, are actually scientifically based. I mean, we have scientific documentation for every single one of the comments, the premises that I said, the age stratification of the risk, the employed testing, so that when a young person thinks they're exposed or sick, they can check and then provide alternate living arrangements temporarily, like we do hotels for homeless people. We can do similar things for people living in multi-generational homes. For workers, we can say, look, the disability laws present opportunities for require employers to provide reasonable accommodations.
Have a very large high death rate in its nursing homes and is, but with other combinations.
We've talked about schools at length. I'm a pediatrician by training, and the pain of not having schools open is there are going to be consequences for decades. Children will lose school years, and I think next year, if we're in a better shape, we'll have to figure out if a lot of the kids should go back to the same grade. But in a more open policy, and part of the struggle for schools has been the age of teachers, and the same is true at colleges, but I know, Jay, you're aware of that. How do you explain to people there's potentially greater societal benefit, more of the economy open, some children in schools, less social isolation, but the costs will be deaths? There will be deaths. So I know the data that you presented about the percent of deaths under and over 70 or under and over 60, but that doesn't mean there are no deaths in individuals under 60. How do you explain to people that that's likely going to result in some additional deaths?
I mean, the key thing is context, because you're right. This is a deadly pandemic, and there's no good outcome from it. There's only minimizing harm and death by choosing policies wisely. Let me document some of the harms of the lockdowns that Mark as I've advocated for all the way through the epidemic. Among young children, the child abuse has skyrocketed. Often it's picked up in schools. Our schools have been closed, and so it doesn't get picked up there. There's domestic abuse that's happened. The CDC estimated in June that 1 in 4 young adults seriously considered suicide. 1 in 4. Normally it's something that's on the order of 4%, is now 1 in 4. The school closures have led to vast harm in terms of inequality. Right? So there's going to be kids. This is probably the single biggest generator of inequality since segregation. This is the lockdowns of the schools and society more generally. Physical health, cancer screening was at an 80% drop. I think you all just published a report about that. In colonoscopy and mammograms, there's going to be more stage 4 breast cancers and colon cancers than we've seen in a very long time. Cancer, we actually made a lot of progress against in the past few years. That's about to be reversed, or if it not already is. Cardiac procedures, a drop in angioplasty, a very, very sharp drop. People stayed home. They're more afraid of COVID than getting treated for heart attacks. That's happened already with the lockdowns. These are not, more internationally, the UN estimated in April that 130 million people are on the brink of starvation or potentially at risk of starvation because of the economic dislocation and harm caused by the lockdowns. Mark said that, look, the viral transmission destroys the economy. I hear that, and I hear something like, in the Vietnam War, we have to destroy the village to save it. That's not right. The economy responds to the policies we pick. If we tell all our businesses to close, our schools to close, the economy will be harmed. The economy rebounded when we lifted up some of those restrictions in the third quarter, right? Now, we talk about the economy as if it were just dollars, but it's not. I've documented, I think already, all of the devastating physical and mental harms that are caused by lockdowns, both nationally and internationally. Hundreds of millions of people thrown into poverty worldwide. If you're sitting at $2 a day of income and you have a GDP hit of 20% and 10% or whatever the number turns out to be, you're going to starve because it's a disproportionate hit. It's incredibly unequal, unfair, immoral policy that we've adopted. And to say that we can't protect our vulnerable, I think that's just a failure of imagination. Logistically, it's not impossible. It's difficult, but we have to put our minds to it. I think reducing community transmission has become a crutch that's prevented us from putting our minds to it in appropriate ways. So,
real quick, there was some important stuff that he actually said regarding how we're actually responding to everything and the seriousness of the actual virus and all of that. just dealing with the whole pandemic, um, and dealing with schools and all of those things. We just did it. We didn't go about it the right way. So I wanted to kind of play a little bit of that regarding the herd immunity thing, because it's a big deal. And I think that for more research or more understanding, just go look up what they talked about early on in the conversation, the Great Barrington Declaration. Read up and see what that is, and it just basically is an outline of it. It tells you right there, which proposes to allow those at minimal risk of death to live their lives normally, to build up immunity to the virus through natural infection, while better protecting those who are at higher risk. It's deadly. It's a deadly approach to do, because those of us who may be asymptomatic and have mild symptoms, with this particular thing, we're not getting rid of it. And then you got to have like so many people infected by it to where you start to diminish these things. But I'm gonna say it like I said it once before: you will not achieve herd immunity without a vaccine. Period. You will not achieve herd immunity without a vaccine. So I should have led with this, but I wanted to go on a whole nother subject because we get mRNA so miscombobulated. So I want to just kind of go for it. Now, this was published by statnews.com, written by Mrs. Cooney, Elizabeth Cooney, on 12/1/2020. She says, while the first two COVID-19 vaccines rely on messenger RNA technology speed toward regulatory approval in the U.S., it's worth remembering the vehicle that gets them where they need to go in the body. Lipid nanoparticles are the fatty molecular envelopes that help strands of mRNA, the genetic messenger for the making DNA code into proteins, evade the body's biological gatekeepers and reach their target cell without being degraded. They are enabling some of the most advanced technologies being used in vaccines and drugs. These carriers are used to package the active chemicals in drugs, such as the chemotherapy doxyle of the cholesterol-lowering medicines Repatha and Praluent, so they get to their targets with fewer unwanted side effects. And nanoparticles are being investigated to vary the genome editing CRISPR-Cas9 to target organs in hopes of solving another delivery challenge. When he brought up cancer destroying people, ladies and gentlemen that are watching this live right now, they are developing mRNA vaccines to fight against cancers. Who's polarized more by cancers? Black people. We stand to gain from this. Think about all the people that we've lost in our families. I said this on the other show. We lost tons of people to cancer. If we could beat cancer, this tool can beat cancer. Sequenced right, and we see the science behind it that help save lives of the people that we love and cherish the most, then you know what's going down. This is why we have to pay huge attention to mRNA vaccines and its evolution into resolving issues that our grannies wouldn't afford the opportunity of having, our mothers and fathers, cousins, aunts, uncles wouldn't afforded those opportunities. We're thinking that our family members are beating cancer, and then next thing you know, a few years later, the cancer's back and it's spreading fast and it's somewhere else, and then next thing you know, they transitioning, and then we wondering how the hell that happened. Well, they're trying to create mRNA vaccines to help resolve those issues. Now, in 2018, the biotech Alnylam turned Nobel Prize-winning RNA interference research interferes research into the first siRNA drug, Onpattro, for patients with inherited neurological disorder by packaging the small interfering RNA in the lipid nanoparticles. Now, similar formulations are paving the way for the messenger RNA vaccines. In my mind, one of the heroes in this story is the RNA nanoparticle, said Daniel Anderson, professor of chemical engineering at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, because siRNA led to mRNA vaccines. The FDA's approval of the first RNAi-based drug was proof these nanoparticles was not just tools we use in the lab to manipulate genes, Anderson said in a new stat report on nanomedicine, but proof they can be translated into approved medicines. Nanomedicine is crucial to delivering mRNA vaccines, but it is also key in formulating existing drugs and formulating new ones to treat COVID-19 patients. The new report explains. Before COVID-19 spread around the globe, mRNA vaccines were in the early stages of development in the biotech companies, and nanotechnology was central to their efforts. This what makes this revolutionary vaccine huge is because you have the biotech and biomed industries thriving, but coders, all y'all that's at home that know how to code, that's working for these jobs and doing all them codings, you got a future with these new mRNA vaccines if you apply yourself correctly. After all, viruses are naturally occurring nanoparticles, and indeed the nanotechnology community has long been trying to capitalize on the properties of viruses and mimic their behavior. For example, for the design of a virus like nanoparticles for targeting drug delivery and gene editing. An editorial in Nature Nanotechnology pointed out in August. I will pull out the highlighted in blue stuff, but we'll be outdated. That's normally what I usually do when I'm reading these articles, is I get to clicking all the blue stuff. They take me to other articles, and you got to read all this other stuff to get familiar. What's important in this particular paragraph are a few things. It says, after all, viruses are naturally occurring nanoparticles. And indeed, the nanotechnology community has long been trying, to capitalize on the properties of the viruses and mimic their behavior. So they've been using this nanoparticles and nanotechnology to try to mimic a virus's behavior. They want to know how the virus is behaving. One way to do that is if you know the sequencing of the virus. Once you figure out the sequencing and how it's behaving and things of that nature, then you can mimic it using nanotechnology. This is why you don't need the strand. So this is groundbreaking, and we just kind of really ignored it. We paid attention to Facebook Lives, rap music beefs, and everything else. Meanwhile, the science community with their head down, doing all this busy work and trying to shoo off a alternative facts president. We ain't get none of this. So once packed in vaccine messenger RNA that encodes for a protein found on the surface of the novel coronavirus, should compel the body cells to produce the protein, spurring an immune system reaction that will teach your body how to fight the virus and thus prevent COVID-19. Now, I changed the words right there for a reason. This is what this mRNA vaccine is going to do. I'm going to say it again. Once packaged in a vaccine messenger, that's what the M is, the mRNA that encodes for a protein found on the surface of the novel coronavirus should compel the body's cells to produce that protein, spurring an immune system reaction that will teach the body how to fight the virus and thus prevent COVID-19. Many people think by eating healthy, dieting, and exercising, that's going to help you create an immune system that will prevent you from catching this disease. That is that's not true. Even the most healthiest people have contracted COVID-19 and some of them have been hospitalized. Some of them even have transitioned. Some of them have made it through in some instances, but like I said about my friend, man, he's been to the doctor and all of these things. His doctor has told him he's one of the healthiest people that you ever could be around, and he was a football player, and so that's his body for since his childhood years. All he knew was sports and activities, and he got it. You know what I'm saying? So that's minimum here when it comes to that. Like, food does not treat your body how to create an immune response. And I think that's a misconception that people have. You know what I'm saying? This is what makes vaccines so innovative, because it helps create an immune response. Food is not going to do that. Nothing you drink will be able to do that. It's a different technique from one used by now I'm going to continue. It's a different technique from the one used by traditional vaccines. Here we go. See, traditional vaccines, you got to have like the dead virus, which mimic diseases components to trick the immune system into building defenses against future infections with the real thing. In contrast, mRNA vaccines jumpstart cellular protein making machinery to fight the invader. I'm going to read that again because I probably confused you. See, it's a different technique from the one used by traditional vaccines, the mRNA, because the traditional, which mimic disease components to trick the immune response into building defenses against future infections with the real thing. In contrast, mRNA vaccines jumpstart cellular protein making machinery to fight the invader. A nanocarrier system made up of lipid and polymeric and nanoparticles can bring mRNA into cells to instruct them to make antigens and stimulate the immune system to make antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. That's why, when they're trying to see if you've been exposed to COVID-19, they give you an antibody test. And if you have those built up antibodies, that means you're going to, of course, test positive for COVID-19, and they know that. So this is important to know that, how this mRNA vaccine will help us in resolving a lot of these things now, because you need to build an immune response. You need to make the antibodies against SARS-CoV-2, and they're going to do this the safest way possible. This is why mRNA technology is on the rise. Now, these lipids and polymers are designed to escape enzymes that might rapidly degrade the mRNA or limit how well cells take it up. This is why I said cells are important, because here you go. Immune stimulated boosters can also be added to provoke a stronger immune response. Nanomaterials could also play a key role in getting vaccines to people in resource poor or densely populated countries. Vaccines could one day be administered through microneedle patches, single-dose slow-release implants, film-based nanomaterials, or plant viral nanoparticles for antigen delivery, which do not require cold chains. That day seems far off in the race to find a coronavirus vaccine that works, but it remains to be seen whether SARS-CoV-2 will be more like the flu, requiring a new shot every year because it mutates. Nano formulations could potentially be used to deliver stronger doses of intravenous or inhaled dexamethasone, one of the few existing drugs to show some efficacy in dampening the inflammation from COVID-19 patients suffer directly to hyperactive immune cells. Based on animal studies of other diseases, I always get this: rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, liver fibrosis, and cancer, scientists believe sending the steroid encased in a liposome nanocarrier directly to macrophages, where nanoparticles are known to accumulate, would be more potent than giving free dexamethasone in order to control the cytokine storms that patients suffer when their immune response is too strong. Dexamethasone has already been formulated as a nanomedicine for the treatment of multiple myeloma. For COVID-19, a nanomedicine formulation could allow targeting a certain immune cell in the lungs if inhaled, or other immune cells elsewhere if given intravenously. What up, everything? All right, so that's that article right there on that. One of the key things about this is that we really need to get into the perspectives of all of this. Now, in every state, there's a representative from your state that is a part of the FDA's approval committee. Well, I don't know if it's every state, but I know in my state, one of the leads in our state is this African American guy that I've been touting around, and I don't want to bring him up right now, but I feel like we're in good hands with that brother. So let's get in the stats other article regarding the story of mRNA. How once dismissed idea became a leading technology in the COVID-19 race. What y'all think them is right there? Well, I already gave it up, shoot. But they freezers. The freezer farms right there. That's one of the things that they're taking on as a challenge is how to store the vaccine once it's created and how to keep it in a safe temperature. And then the last, lecture that we actually listened to well, I don't know if I said it to y'all, but they call it that last mile. A virologist on CNN called it the last mile. The last mile for virologists is basically, from the time it's actually created to the time it's stored to the time it gets into the arm of the person being vaccinated. That last mile is from that storage spot to the person. They want to make sure that temperature remains the same and unchanged until it can actually stay in, because that's when it's the most potent. But I'm not going to bore y'all to death with a lot of this. I'm actually going to kind of leave it right there where we are. And I'm just going to ask y'all to really just understand a little bit more about mRNA vaccines, what they are, how they work. And, see, the promise of the vaccine is real. It's really a big deal. And while we're being very, this is on my Facebook page. If you're on my Facebook page, you actually can go and read this article right here. This is a pretty good article as well. And it gets into a lot of stuff too. So we just need to read. We need to read and understand and comprehend what's going on. What is mRNA? Why are we so worried about what an mRNA vaccine is? You know what I mean? And how it works. And that's what we just need to do. But I'm gonna stop it live on Facebook. I'm gonna be on YouTube for a little bit and chop it up with the people. I know Brother Soup Tech in this thing, man. What you got, bruh?
Yeah, not much. That was a good article. Nice little interview. Shit, I'm just learning, man. I'm learning like everybody else.
Yeah. It's beneficial for us to learn, man. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't know why we can't take time out to learn, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, why we don't want to learn? Like, what's stopping us from being students of information and then properly, pushing the right information? We got people telling us what we should be thinking and what we should be doing, man. And they telling us all the wrong crazy. They telling us the crazy stuff. They're telling us the crazy stuff. I think I am still live on Facebook though. I forgot how to make that mug stop. Oh, no, let me see. Delete our Facebook. Nope. Nah, I ain't delete. I'm just remove it from the broadcast. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, remove from the broadcast. Well, what up, y'all? What's up? Facebook? What's good in the hood? What the business is? What y'all think about that information, though? Pseudos are associated with mRNA with the rhesus monkey pseudoscience. That boy retarded. If it ain't everything, man, it's either everything or it's pure. One of them two foods. They're retarded, man. What you got though, Sute? What you think about that lecture though, man? You know what I'm saying? That white man science, man. Somebody throwing the video down. That's cool too. What you got though, Sute? My bad.
I see that. Wow. Ain't no such thing as white man science. That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful to all the black people in the field doing this work. You know what I'm saying? Making a conscious effort to bring scientific literacy to our people. You know what I'm saying? I just feel like that's disrespectful to them. So yeah, they kill me when people say white man science. Like, show me the definition of white man science. I never heard of that.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Feel you on that, bro. Shoot, I ended the Facebook. It looked like everybody left Facebook and hopped on over here. What's up?
Snowball said we are still trying to glean what the side effects are.
Well, right now, Snowball, we ain't heard about side effects. We listened to one Q&A earlier that did mention actually side effects. A side effect that caused the death somebody's life, and that I don't know if you heard it or not. All knowledge. I don't know if you heard it or not, Snowball, but a dude actually died that was a part of the trials. Just so happened that this dude who died was a part of the placebo part of the trials, and he actually ended up contracting COVID-19 and losing his life behind it. You know what I mean?
Basically, what you're saying is he died because he didn't get the actual vaccine.
Yeah, he died because he did not get it. He got the placebo, and because he got the placebo, he took an L. It's sad, you know what I mean? It's sad, but it's just the truth, man. That shows us that the actual people who received the vaccine, it works. It's working. Now, what we can do is when we get the reports next week, because it will be made public to us, we're going to be able to engage those reports in a way that we've been able to engage every other trial. We're going to see how many people was a part of the study, which we already know. We're going to see how many people actually had the placebo versus how many people actually had the vaccine. We're going to know that. We're going to know the results from the people with the vaccine, and we're going to know the results for the people with the placebo. They're going to give us everything that they've been talking about, what we already know. So all we really got to do is we ain't got to go through all the fluff, because we know the methodology that's being used based on previous trials. All we got to do is just go in there and study the results. And then we can go in there and look at the efficacy rate and see how the efficacy rate is working. That's why they touting it so big, talking about 94% and all that. And then we can go right back down and we can look at the adverse effects, because guess what they got to do during these trials? Provide the information for the adverse effects on both sides of the argument. They're going to tell us that the same people who got the placebo and got the dang on vaccine had this type of reaction. We should be able to see that. What was the reaction that they received? Oh, minor swelling from the arm. Did possible fever. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, something else that could actually go that way. Oh, yeah, it's not. Yeah, I kind of figured that you didn't catch that part, but yeah, on a lecture that we listened to earlier, everybody that was actually listening to it can actually tell you. Like, if you rewatch this video and go back, you'll hear the dude say that the dude died. So, you know, America's paying attention to Europe because Europe went ahead and sped up its process to start its vaccinations So we actually can learn from the, what the Europeans are doing over there. We can learn from that. And why these Moderna and Pfizer ask for approval, when approval comes through and they getting ready to do everything they need to do, we continue to do that. This is the first time in our history we have the ability or afforded the right to walk with science through the entire process. Other pandemics and epidemics, man, that plagued people, they took them on out of there. They wouldn't afforded this right. They didn't have technology. They didn't have the ability to get information as fast as we're getting information and then be able to walk along with science on this journey. So we're going to be able to actually sit here and we can monitor the effects of the efficacy and the adverse effects of this vaccine on our own. We don't even need the doctors. Well, we do need the doctors because we need their information. And we do need the scientists because they and the people that's writing the articles and publishing the science. We do need them because we need that data as well. But we're able to real time, bro. We can do this too. We can go out in our own dang on community. And if you get 100 people email in your community, ask them a simple question. Have you been vaccinated? Have you had the new vaccine? This is just a hypothetical, right? This is how you do research. You formulate everything that you need to do. So you got to collect your data. So part of our collecting our data is we send out a mass email, or we put out a flyer. We go put on everybody's door. We go in our whole neighborhood and tag everybody's house in our neighborhood. I ain't saying go all of, the whole community, just in your neighborhood with a questionnaire. With the questionnaire, we ask a simple question. Have you been have you had, just simple, just keep it simple. Have you had the new mRNA vaccine? Yes or no? If yes, then the next question would be, which vaccine company or which vaccine did you have? And then we list Pfizer, Moderna, what's that? AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, etc., or other. And then if it's other, we ask them to list which vaccine it is. Then we can ask any other additional question. Once we ask another additional question, then we can ask them where they can return this particular questionnaire to. Once you got, you sent out 100. Once you got all 100 back, or if you just get 90 back, right? If you just get 90 back, then you sent out 100. So when you're reporting your data and you're drawing up your you're showing your methodology and you putting in your essay what you were doing, you need to put that data. Send out 100 questionnaires, receive 90 responses. Out of the 90 responses, how many of the 90 took the Moderna? How many of them took Pfizer? How many of them took AstraZeneca? How many of them had Johnson & Johnson? How many of them had other? So now we get all of that. All right? We got all that data. So now we got big boy data. Now, out of the 90, this looks just like a scientific article, bro. I'm telling you how it's done. Out of the 90, we go and we done broke them down now to sets. So now we group all the AstraZenecas, all the Pfizers, all the Modernas, all the Johnson & Johnsons, and all the others. We group them up. If you got 20 people that took the Moderna, you know what I'm saying? And whatever the research question we ask behind it, have you had any adverse effects after taking this vaccine? Yes or no? Then list your reactions. If you got 20 people, none of them said anything with the Moderna, that's your data that you got. They might say, and I'm telling you, bro, they gotta say yeah, because they're gonna have like some little minor swelling, feverish temperature, something like that, like minor adverse effects. So we take that data. You go to the Pfizer, you do the same thing. You go to AstraZeneca, you do the same thing. You go with Johnson & Johnson, you do the same thing. And then you go with other and you do the same thing with that. From that, we gather all our information. We might find 20 people. We might find one person or 20 people that might have had a real serious adverse effect or response to the vaccine. Maybe. But if everybody else was mild, feverish temperature, mild swelling near the entry point of the vaccine, swelling near the entry of the vaccine, those are mild adverse effects. Instantly. Because you can go get a flu shot, you can go get a measles, MMR shot, polio, whatever, whatever. You might have the same reaction. A little slick fever and redness near the entry spot. Roster said, I'm taking the vaccine if I grow another arm. Facts. That boy retarded. You see what I'm saying? But what we just did is pretty much do our own research independently, and we didn't rely on the scientists. But think about what I just presented to everybody. Like, how many people is going to do that? See, there's a methodology to a questionnaire. Then we can type up all that data that we get, and we can present it to our people. And we say we did the work. But you know what our people going to say? You ain't do that. Now, I just sit here on this whole show and showed y'all how we actually can do a questionnaire, write up the questionnaire, send out the questionnaire, get the responses back from the questionnaire, and publish our findings. And we would be rejected by our own people. But you know who would accept it? The scientific community. They would accept it. You know why they would accept it? Because we would be independent. We're not affiliated with none of these companies. They got the vaccines. We're not in the scientific community. We have no ties to none of this stuff. We did independent research. We published our findings and we send it to these people. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to write it up in their little online news journals and articles, publish our findings, give us credit for anybody involved in that. And god dang it, they're going to get the money. They're going to probably cut us a little check or something like that. But, that's how some stuff go when you're dealing with independent researchers. We have no affiliation. He said, well, they know much vaccines they are getting. Will it be a choice? Yes. Snowball, yes. Yes, absolutely. Because there's a price difference between each vaccination, first and foremost. You got, they claiming 96% efficacy by one company, 94 by another, 90 by another. Yes, there's going to be options for you. You got a lot of people saying I'm doing the Moderna. You got a lot of people saying I'm going to do the Pfizer. This is where stocks come into play because you're going to have you some stock in whichever one of these you do, because if one's better than the other, then guess what? Stock go up. Stock go all the way up, homie. But yeah, they're going to do that. I've created surveys in Google Docs and use SurveyMonkey to email. Exactly, Snot. Yep, and we can use something as simple as SurveyMonkey. Shoot, your job do it every day. Email the whole flow. They want to know how you like the new transition in the job. That's all we doing. The same thing. Man, Bex, listen, 45 just be talking out the side of his hand. Y'all already know what's up with 45. You know, bro, you know when you go to the doctor, I mean when you go to the pharmacy and get your flu shot or something like that, it costs you a little money. Maybe not a whole lot, but a little money. A couple dollars. Mm-hmm. I'm reading. Facts, Zane. That's big facts. That's how we knew what strain. That's why we knew it was mutating. We knew back in what? February, March, that the virus was mutating because it was a different strand than the Europeans that came back, that came to America. It wasn't the same one as they had in Wuhan. Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can get y'all some science on that. For anybody who might be rewatching this, think I'm talking out my butthole. COVID-19 genome map. Let me see if I can find us a map. Let me share my screen. I figure some of y'all will be going to sleep right about now. I know y'all don't know what y'all looking at. I can't explain this either. Not the way this looking. If Nahisa was on here, he'll tell you. Here you go. SARS-CoV-2, the genome. Mm-hmm. See, I can't explain it like that. I ain't that cold-blooded with it. I just hang around smart guys. No matter how much studying I do. Mm-hmm. What did he say? Now he's still watching, but he working. He gonna correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. Tell me what I can get better at. Do it all the time. That's what your brother supposed to do. This a good one. Mm-hmm. This a good one. This go to Zane point. Look, y'all. This go to Zane point right here. Every strand. Look at them colors. Let's go. I can't even do none of them. But here y'all go though. Look at Wuhan. Purple than the mug. From purple, you start getting like yellow, orangish up in here. Then you start getting green. So you got like oranges, green, purple. orange, then all of a sudden you get purple and orange make red. I don't know. Might be wrong on that. What two colors make red? Nah, red and purple make orange. Everything in the lecture that we listen to, they said it's potentially we would need one, probably if it's act like the flu, we may need one every year. They didn't rule that out. But remember, you're going to have 2 shots unless they come up with the right dosage. Or just a more improved dosage. Well, popcorn fire. This is my last meal. Popcorn. Fasting tomorrow. I might fast all the way through the weekend. No. No food. But yeah, man. You know what I'm saying? This is how we know what we know. Hold up. Let's do this. See, y'all think I'm crazy. Some of y'all do. Some of y'all think I might be too much of a geek. I know that some of y'all do. But sometimes it's good to just listen to some of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? I heard y'all reading audio books now. This is about the only thing audio that I can listen to. You know what I'm saying? I really don't like to use YouTube, so I'd rather get into see what they saying. Front lines, Q&A, testing. Let's see if we can get into mitigation. I'm trying to look and see if they got something showing where they mutate. If they speaking on how the virus mutate. Look at that. Eye contact, get in your eye. Y'all didn't know that. Like I said the other day when I said, people shooting it out. Look at that. The conversation about the update on hydroxychloroquine, my bad. We wasn't listening to none of these scientists when they were talking about it then, man. We were just reading articles. Some of us. Look at that, mask. Come on, man. I ain't seeing it on here. I might be able to find it one on another one. But let me see. I can continue with the herd one. I don't think we really need to. Let's deal with this one. Nah, I think everybody know how it's transmitted. Y'all all know that. Let's see. We'll talk about obesity. We don't need to go through the approval process. I think we kind of understand that. The latest one, though, the latest lecture is this one on the update. I can get into the latest one because this a good one too. It's the latest one. Let me see how long this one is. But yeah, man, I think it's okay to listen to these people, man. You reading their work.
From the JAMA Network, this is Conversations with Dr. Bachner. Interviews featuring researchers and thinkers in healthcare about their publications in the latest issue of JAMA.
Let me make sure I ain't getting no strike.
Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Bachner. Once again, it is Howard Bachner, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA. And once again, I'm joined by Nicholas Christakis. Nicholas is a professor both of sociology and medicine. He's a sterling professor of social and natural sciences, internal medicine, biomedical engineering at Yale. A very esteemed position at Yale. Not many sterling professors. How many sterling professors at Yale, Nicholas?
I don't know exactly. I think about 40 actually. Out of 700 faculty, something like that.
Before we begin, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and I say it to everyone in my emails: stay healthy and keep it small this year. So, Nicholas, we're going to talk a bit about what you've written in your book entitled Apollo's Arrow, but I have some questions as a lead up to that. What's your impression, Nicholas, of the last couple weeks around COVID-19 in the United States? The numbers, the number of hospitalizations. What's your sense of this?
First of all, I mean, the remarkable news in the last 2 weeks is the release of the phase 3 results, the interim results, and now we're beginning to get the final results of the 2 vaccines, now the 3rd vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine. So, and of course, the Sinovac vaccine, the Chinese vaccine is in the background as well. And that is big news.
Those are the good and the bad, the numbers and then the vaccine news. But go ahead, Nicholas.
Well, I was just going to say one of the arguments that I try to make in Apollo's Arrow is that this way we are living right now seems so alien and unnatural to us. But it's really important for people to understand that plagues are not new to our species. They're just new to us. You know, we think this is such a crazy experience that we're having, but people have been struggling with plagues for thousands of years. That the Bible talks about plagues, Shakespeare talks about plagues, the Iliad opens with the plague on the Greeks that Apollo rains down. But what's different, what is in fact different about our current experience is that our time in the crucible happens to occur at a moment when we can invent a vaccine in real time. The technological capacity that we have to actually in real time respond and within a year have completed phase 3 trials of active agents is mind-boggling. And we are lucky, we are so lucky that our moment facing this age-old threat is happening now. So that's the good news. And that's a very big dramatic thing in the last 2 weeks that obviously everyone is paying attention to. There's more. I don't want people to think the vaccines are a panacea. And I also don't want people to be overly optimistic or misinterpret what we still don't know about vaccines, the existing ones, which is still considerable. On the bad news side, you know, I think our country, we should be ashamed of how we've done. We have not adequately made efforts to control the epidemic. We are having, as everyone had expected, a second wave. Yeah. The debate had been is how bad the second wave would be. I think when you and I last spoke, we talked about the fact that there would be waves. Every respiratory pandemic has these waves. There'll be another one in a year. Whether we have a vaccine or not, there will be another wave in a year. The vaccine may tamp down the amplitude of that wave, but we'll see a boost again in a year. I think this wave will surely be as bad as the first wave and could be twice as bad. And of course, the 1918 pandemic, the second wave was 4 times as bad in terms of overall mortality in our country. So I'm very worried that we are just not doing the right things we need to do as a nation, and it's going to be bad, get worse.
Returning to the science, it's interesting because Tony had written a viewpoint for us a few years ago about new vaccine platforms. And, you know, he has a wonderful figure chart in it talking about the time to develop a vaccine. He talks about getting it down to 18 months. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And he talks about adenovirus, mRNA, and DNA. Unfortunately, we've had a test case and we've gotten it down to under a year, substantially under a year. It is extraordinary.
Most of the listeners here will understand, of course, that even from the moment we have the successful conduct of a phase 3 trial that
that shows that the drug or the vaccine is effective and that there's no significant safety problems so far discerned. And even once we get approval, which is likely to be accelerated, as a nation, we have a number of other problems still. We, first of all, have to manufacture millions of doses. We have to distribute them. And several of these vaccines require quite demanding cold chains. And we have to persuade the public to take the vaccines and get an acceptance. And if you do some basic calculations based on the R0 of this pathogen, the basic reproduction number, if you take as a benchmark that the R0 for this is about 3, the herd immunity threshold using the standard formula is R0 minus 1 divided by R0, or 3 minus 1 divided by 3 is 2/3. The herd immunity threshold is 67%. However, that makes the assumption that what is something known the well-mixed assumption. It assumes that everyone is equally likely to interact with everyone else, which of course is not true. There's network structure to the human population. There's heterogeneous risk. And if you make some adjustments based on that, it brings the ultimate herd immunity threshold down to about 40 to 50%. Let's say 50% of the people, if we did nothing and the pathogen just kept working its way through our species, we would reach this milestone of 50%, and then the epidemic force of the pathogen will be diminished. The pathogen would still exist, it could still infect people, but we would no longer have an epidemic. So if we did nothing, the target is 50%. Right now, our best estimates are about 12% of Americans are infected. So we're about a fourth of the way there. Now, on the other hand, if we develop this vaccine and we go through all these additional steps, which is that we have to, now we've approved it, we have to manufacture it, distribute it, get people to accept it, that's going to take some time, maybe another year, I would say. Meanwhile, the germ is still spreading. So from my perspective, either way, we're going to be living in a changed world through, let's say, early 2022, where we're wearing masks, we're physical distancing, we're closing schools periodically. And then we will reach this important milestone either naturally through the spread of the pathogen or artificially through the deployment of the vaccine. So that's one line of ideas that I think it's important to keep in mind. And then it's not like the world is going to magically return to normal, because even though we will have, let's say, the epidemiological and biological impact of the pandemic before us, we still are going to have to cope then with the psychological, sociological, and economic implications. Our economy has been tanked and so on. And it's going to take a while for us to unwind that impact. Plus, the clinical impact, although in the end, between at least 500,000 Americans will die of this condition, and unfortunately, and maybe as many as 1 million, it'll be in that range. We also have to remember something I know you know, which is that the disability of the germ as well. That is to say, even if the virus doesn't kill you, some significant fraction of Americans will have some medium to long-term disability from this. So it's a lot to endure still. The vaccine is not going to be a panacea. We're not suddenly returning to business as usual in a few months.
Right. I've gone over the numbers. It's always interesting because the vaccine won't be available for 80 million people, children. So you're going to take out 80 million. So of the 330 million, the group that could potentially get it is 330 million minus the 80 million children that won't be initially eligible and not likely eligible for quite a while because there's no child studies yet planned. Just to go back to the distribution, we may end up being here for an hour because we have a long way to go. I'm optimistic about the first 20 million doses. They're going to go to healthcare workers and they're going to be hospital-based. Nicholas, it's the next 100 million.
Yes.
And sadly, the Trump administration hasn't shared much information. It's going to get distributed at the state level. No one knows the arithmetic that's going to allow it to get distributed. And, it's nice to send Massachusetts or Connecticut or where you live currently, Vermont, 2 million doses. But what do they do with 2 million doses? So is it your sense that we'll do well initially, but it'll be the next 100 million that will really be the struggle?
I think that's exactly right. And I'm sure the vaccine manufacturers have already been tooling up, have been preparing to manufacture the vaccines in anticipation of a successful trial, spending hundreds of millions of dollars getting ready and manufacturing the doses, even not knowing whether they would be successful or not. So the first few doses will go to the placebo arm of the study, which is, of course, exactly right. Those volunteers took risks to help us discover that the vaccine worked, and they should have first dibs on doses. So that's 20,000 people for each vaccine, roughly speaking. Then, of course, as you say, they will go to healthcare workers and first responders, which is ethically unproblematic and uncontested, people that are putting their lives on the line and need to be immune in order to be able to do their jobs. And also, those are individuals who are best able to judge the risks and are, as you said, are very easy to distribute to population and to discern. So that's a few million people. And then after that, as you said, there's other groups of people that will need to be immunized and will be done fairly efficiently. But the next 100 million is going to take time. And it's going to require, I think, the next administration to stand up a public outreach, a public health communication campaign that is effective by people who are seen as credible. And here I even have in mind public figures like Tom Hanks or Dolly Parton, who could talk about their experiences. Tom Hanks, of course, had the condition, or Tony Fauci, I think, has a lot of credibility, or former surgeon generals. And we're going to cultivate confidence in the American people that we're not lying to them, that when we say something, we talk about our uncertainty, we talk about our confidence, we talk about the evidence for our claims. And then when we revise what we say, we explain why. We previously told you this because of this reason. Now we're revising it for these other reasons. So all of this is going to be a huge challenge. And that's why I think it's going to take some time, and why, as I said, the virus, of course, is still spreading among us. So one way or the other, we will reach this herd immunity threshold.
Your comment about making sure we can correct ourselves or somehow communicating uncertainty. There's been an interesting discussion in social media. Medicine is used to uncertainty. We always say we think so. There's rarely that definitive study. Most likely, it's rarely that definitive trial. That doesn't play well in social media. It ends up creating an enormous amount of noise. And so I think that's really been part of the struggle. We just received a viewpoint by Raina Marchand about how social media changes the way we have to communicate public health messages. And I think that uncertainty that medicine is used to just doesn't do that well in this case. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I have. And I talk about it in Apollo Zero. I mean, first of all, I think one of the challenges is to begin to educate the American public about what science is and is not. Right. So science is a search for the truth. And it's often incorrect, but scientists don't mind the fact that it's incorrect because they see science as a self-correcting process. I published a result. Here's my evidence for this result. I'm communicating it to my colleagues. And then someone else comes along and does another experiment and says, no, actually, you were wrong about that. And it's a whole system of...
Well, Uncle always say, he said it today, that science is self-correcting. Self-correcting. So if they end up getting something wrong based on one interpretation of data, it'll correct itself and the data will update and then it will be accepted.
Understand the world. As Tony Fauci said it like in a couple of months ago, he made this remark. He said, the system tends to correct itself, which is one of the good things. Unlike ideology, which tends not to be self-correcting, science does tend to be self-correcting over some period of time. And I think it's important for people to understand this so that the scientists are telling you today, here's our best guess as to what the truth is based on the data we have. Here's the things against this idea. Here are the things for this idea. And soon we'll know more. We may revise our opinion, but we're slowly getting closer and closer to the truth. This is the thing. And I think getting people to understand this is part of the challenge. And in a way, the virus struck us at a moment when our intellectual life in this country had been thinned out, when we were especially weak. There are a number of trends, macro trends in our society, which I think are harming us. The first is, as you suggested, the lack of scientific understanding by the person on the street, the state of knowledge about science in the American public. Another related to that is a kind of anti-elitism, which manifests itself as a kind of anti-expertise. So we think that, what do the experts know? Like every person thinks that they're an expert. And maybe that's been abetted by social media as well. And this is a very odd kind of belief system in our society right now, because when you need a plumber to deal with a plumbing emergency in your house, you want an expert plumber and you believe that the plumber is an expert compared to you. And same, for example, with a surgeon. You want an expert surgeon or a car mechanic or whatever it is. And the same goes with a whole range of topics. People devote their lives to acquiring expertise. It's not a kind of elitism, it's a kind of devotion. And it should be seen as that. That's the second. So first is science knowledge. Second, lack of science knowledge. Second is an anti-expertise, which is a manifestation of this anti-elitism. A third is a kind of political polarization in our society, which has been well documented to be at a great high, which manifests itself across all kinds of topics. And people think things are like you're with me or you're against me, that you're either, on this side or on that side. Or masks, for example, became politicized as political symbols, mask wearing, which didn't happen in other countries. But in our country, they came to be seen as symbols of virtue or of liberty, for instance, which is nuts.
Hold on. Are y'all looking at this? Are y'all looking at this shit? Look at this. 14 million. Are you serious? This thing come from all the way over here, man, and blow up. Europe, it looked like it's a whole lot right here. But when you go through here, they wearing masks and stuff in Europe. You know, you got to break Europe up in all these, you know, look, you got to break them up like that. You know what I'm saying? You got to break them up like that right there. Still don't total out to the U.S. because with a disingenuous president, we can expose ourselves, even though there's a lot of asymptomatic responses and people having mild reactions. Some people having mild reactions, but we had a total of 270, almost 300,000 deaths. And that's crazy, man.
Tool to stop respiratory droplets, And finally, there's a loss of nuance in our society where people seem to think that things are black or white about so many topics. We can't speak in terms of shades of gray. And so to summarize, I think all of these things are in some sense a mark of immaturity right now in our society, and that we need to in some sense grow up a little bit and begin to face squarely the reality of this virus and work together. In some sense, I think our leaders need to call us to sacrifice, to shared purpose, to kind of a commitment to confront and repel this invader. And we need to quickly get our thinking more clear if we're going to do a good job of it.
I think it was so frustrating for Tony, who was trying to lead the national dialogue, and he kept trying to say, it's not close or open. It's not life or the economy. And he tried over 6 months to communicate we can do both simultaneously, keep the economy partially open and save lives. And it ended up being polarized into it was either health or the economy. And he tried mightily to change that conversation, largely unsuccessfully. Now, we haven't touched on what our conversation was supposed to be today yet.
No, I want to. Yeah, I know, and I want to come back to something we left standing with the vaccine.
Okay,
but before I come to that, I want to say something else, which is people need to understand that the problems we're having with the economy in our society are not as a result of what the government is doing. There is a result of what the virus is doing. For thousands of years during times of plague, economies have collapsed, even when governments did nothing. Right, as I discuss in the book. The slowing down of social interactions, the collapse of an economy is a function of having a contagious, deadly disease. And in principle, when the government takes action, we do that to mitigate those consequences, both the health consequences and the economic consequences. So my argument would be is any actions the government has taken actually have put us in a better place than we otherwise would have been. We could have been much wiser in the actions we took as a nation, much, much wiser. And we haven't yet talked about this, but I'm ashamed at how incompetent we have been at coping. We could not have prevented all deaths. We could not have prevented all economic hardship, but we certainly could have done better than we're doing and than we're going to do, because we're already at 1,400 deaths a day right now. Every day, 1,400 Americans are dying every day. And that's going to keep rising over the coming weeks. So we're going to blow by 500,000 American excess deaths. At the ultimate, when this pandemic is over and the history books are written, this will be the second worst respiratory pandemic we've had in 100 years. Certainly, it won't be as bad as 1918, but it'll be much worse than 1957, which was the prior second worst respiratory pandemic.
Steve Wolf's research.
Did y'all hear what this man said? That we are experiencing 1,400 deaths a day. And they are projecting this thing to blow up and surpass 500,000 deaths. Do you not know the risk that we're running for our loved ones to be immediately impacted by that number? That means someone very close to you could transition. at any moment over these next few months. And this is the fear that I actually had, man, with people being around my sister, because she's had pre-existing conditions. She's a she's had she's had a transplant where she needed a kidney, and now the kidney that she just got, what she's had for a while, it's failing, and now she just found a new donor, and she's got to have another transplant. And because she'd been having to go back to dialysis and all of that old stuff. And now she's contracted COVID while she was in Memphis. Her and my niece, because she took my niece with her, they contracted COVID. And I haven't heard from her yet, but it's serious. I ain't want nobody really around my sister. You know what I'm saying? My niece and my nephew and them, they young and dumb. They were hanging out in the projects early on during the pandemic. And y'all can't go around y'all mama with this stuff. They cousins catching it, going through it, for a little while, and then next thing you know, they like, well, if it's meant for me to get it, then I'm gonna get it. Type of attitude. It's the same way like life. I get shot, you know what I mean? I get killed, ain't nothing I can do, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just gonna live it how I live it. That whole out process, and that pissed me off. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I like to keep my nephew King. I like to keep my nephew King around me. You feel me? In the environment that I'm in, because I got these boys and all that, and he try to stay up and be like a big boy with them, but he just 3-year-old. He's just a toddler. But you know what I mean? When he hears Uncle Shawn, he always say Uncle Shawn. He always want to come with me, roll with me. And then he get over here and he run up under Elijah, you know what I'm saying, and Caleb, and mess around and things of that nature. But I can't even get him around right now. I gotta, you know what I mean? I put people on time out. Yeah, appreciate that. But I mean, it's just how it go, you know what I'm saying? So I ain't sweating that part, but I just want y'all to know the seriousness. This dude just hollered out 500,000 deaths. And you know what I'm saying? So we just gotta protect ourselves, man. We can't put our people in jeopardy. I'm quarantined. I work from home. I don't leave the house. You know what I'm saying? Try not to leave the house. I go to the store. I try to go to the store when it ain't nobody out in the store. I try to do my business and get out. You know what I mean? I'm masked up everywhere I go. I'm using hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, antibacterial wipes. When I put gas in my car, I'm using antibacterial wipes. Wiping the handles on my car, all that. I'm just trying to take the safest measures that I can. I don't want to get exposed, and I don't want to expose nobody to it. Feel me? Because I don't want nobody to get snuffed out. We'll have to deal with the conditions that COVID-19 brings when it attacks your brain, your eyes, your hands, your feet, your lungs, your liver, your heart. You know what I'm saying? When it ails your whole body every day and you can't sleep, you can't breathe, you can't do anything, your respiratory system is at its worst. I knew she said I had everything delivered. Yeah, so we have to be very, very, very just cautious and careful and more conscious. But let's keep building.
We had talked about what was then October 1, 225,000 deaths, and then we talk about excess deaths. And in our editorial, we talked about 400,000, and I was worried, was it really going to be 400,000 excess deaths? I think we're going to be past 500,000 excess deaths by January 1?
I don't know by January 1, but we're soon. Yes, we're going to wind up being between 500,000 and 1 million deaths. This is even with a vaccine. And now let me just return to the vaccine topic. So it is magnificent news that these trials are showing efficacy of these vaccines. But let's understand what the trials have shown so far. So for example, in the Pfizer and BioNTech trial, they had 43,000 people. I don't know all the details of the trial, but for the sake of argument, let's assume they were half and half were assigned. Half got the vaccine, half did not. And then to simplify numbers, I'm going to use some approximate numbers to what was found in the trial. It's not exactly right. So let's say 20,000 people got the vaccine, 20,000 did not. And let's say among those who got the vaccine, they said 10 got ill. And among those who did not get the vaccine, 100 got ill. It wasn't exactly those numbers, but approximately. So that's a huge benefit in preventing illness. But we don't know if the vaccine trial prevents death. It could be that 1 out of the 20,000, on average, 1 out of 20,000 people died in the treatment arm, and 1 out of 20,000 died in the placebo arm. And so we may have a vaccine which prevents people from getting ill, but has actually no effect on mortality. That's entirely possible. We still don't know the answer to that question, first. Second, we also don't know if the vaccine prevents infectiousness. It may keep you from getting sick, but it may have not a big effect on whether you spread the germ to other people, which is a big unknown, which we'd like to know. Third, we don't know how safe this vaccine is. So in an N of 40,000, that is terrifically large for detecting many side effects and adverse consequences, but not enough to detect, let's say, a 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 200,000 serious adverse event or death probability from the vaccine. And as you know, usually for vaccines, we benchmark at 1 in a million serious adverse effects or death, or 1 in 10 million. Most of the vaccines we have are very safe, and we tolerate those levels of mortality because, of course, we save thousands of lives with the vaccine, so it's a no-brainer. But if, in fact, these vaccines, 1 in 100,000, let's say, kill people or cause a serious problem, a paralysis or something, we won't really know that till we start rolling it out. And then I think because the world's eyes are on this, we're going to have a serious public messaging problem again, especially if we haven't prepared people for this. So these adverse events, though still rare, and though while the vaccine might still be worthwhile to use, will be breathlessly reported and will sap interest in the vaccine. And last, we can't know if there are long-term adverse consequences from the vaccine. It's just like we can't know about long-term adverse consequences of the virus. We can predict based on other vaccines or other coronaviruses or known biology and known medicine. But there's some things we can't do experiments about. We just have to wait for time to go by. So I'm enormously optimistic and proud of our science and our medicine and what our country has achieved in developing these vaccines. But I just want people not to think that, oh, well, it's over. It's not.
Length of immunity, I would add to the
Yes.
unknown. I'm going to be talking to Paul next week, Paul Offit, and people have already sent me questions. Could you please ask? But I know length of immunity is the other one.
I mean, I'm optimistic about that for a variety of reasons, and I'm sure Paul will know vastly more about this, obviously. And I also think we're going to have so many different types of vaccines coming out that, although this is a complicated area of immunology too, whether you would or wouldn't want people to get different kinds of the vaccines, but I think we're going to see some good vaccines within a year or two.
Plus, we'll be able to follow someone. So we know if it's 6 months, 95% are still protected, then you'll wait a year and then you'll have to re-immunize. So that's knowable, at least. Some of the other things are not so instantly knowable. Nicholas, now I wanted to get to, in part why you're here, you had mentioned some of them, financial, mental health, clinical. Let's start with medicine. What's here to stay in medicine? What has fundamentally occurred that you think has staying power within medicine?
Well, one of the things I think doctors and nurses and healthcare workers appreciate this on the delivery side, but it's especially powerful when we, like other human beings, need to get medical care. The idea that you have to go see your healthcare provider in order to get many routine things taken care of is enormously inefficient and inconvenient. The idea of going to see the doctor to get a prescription refill is absurd, driven by insurance regulations and other kind of bureaucratic requirements. So I think because so much of our healthcare moved online during the pandemic period, I think many of the kinds of changes in healthcare delivery and in reimbursement rightly are here to stay. And I know Zeke Emanuel has also written effectively about this. many routine visits will now move online. And I would hope and assume that they would be reimbursed. And as Zeke has argued, there should be no difference in the reimbursement to avoid doctors saying, oh, come to see me for routine care because I get a little bit more money. You don't want that. You want to avoid that, right?
Or my
you
institution would get more money.
Yes, exactly. And it's not all mercenary, right? But I mean, my point is you want to set the incentives up so that we optimize efficiency in the system and minimize needless dead weight, like having people filling up our hospitals to get stuff that they don't need to come in for, or routine dermatologic evaluations, or I think we're also going to see a profusion of home-based sensors. The Apple Watch, for example, where you can, get a decent trace, of a rhythm and hit a button and send it to your doctor, or home oximeters, or of course glucometers and tidal volume measures, and just so many devices that I think will become more common at home and will allow doctors and nurses to provide in-care home to larger numbers of people. So I think, and web-enabled devices too, even simple ones like thermometers, for example. So I think a lot of those types of technological changes and organizational changes are here to stay when it comes to medicine.
Workplace.
Well, I mean, I think everyone is observing about the whole work from home stuff is going to change and will stay. Many leading tech CEOs have said, I think Facebook said that all their workers can stay at home even afterwards. And Tata Consultancy Services, which is one of the world's leading consulting firms, has also made statements like that. And Qualtrics, a whole bunch of, these are anecdotes, but many big corporations have said this. And part of that will be driven by economics and employee satisfaction. So while the pandemic has been awful, millions of Americans are out of work, at least 30 million Americans. Many people have lost loved ones or have been sick and been disabled. Many people have long COVID. Many businesses have gone out of business. People are staying at home. There are a lot of mental health consequences. However, many people are delighted not to be commuting. If you could do your job at home, you were allowed to do your job at home, now you don't have to commute. Now, for some people, that was also not so great. They like most people like getting out of the house. But anyway, the point is that many employees will appreciate not having to commute, and many employers will appreciate not having to provide office space. They can remove all of that expense from having their workers, having to heat and house and provide all that stuff for their workers. So I think the economics of working from home are going to drive some persistent changes in this regard. Plus the technology. We've all had a dry run of using technology that allows us to do this. So that's going to stick around, I think.
We've been trying to figure it out within the editorial and publishing groups. Like our editorial assistants, our manuscript editors are working incredibly well and efficiently from home. And in Chicago, for some of them, that was an hour commute in both directions. So they're saving 2 hours. Nicholas, but if you're a city like Chicago or a city like New York, and you take out 1 million commuters, that has enormous implications for mass transportation and who's paying for it.
And for air pollution
and real estate. So you've affected the real estate market, you've affected mass transportation. So if you're a mayor of a major city and you will never gain back 30 to 40% of your workforce, they simply will not be commuters. What happens to that infrastructure?
Yes and no. So one of the things I discussed in Apollo Zero is the response to city living since time immemorial.
Okay.
And since time immemorial, whenever there's a plague, people flee the cities and they go to the countryside. And they have for thousands of years. And this is well understood. And they're doing that. And the same thing happened with this pandemic in this country. But the cities always come back, I think partly because the value proposition for living in the cities is so high. People like to live in cities. It's exciting. There are employment opportunities. So I think the cities will come back. I think right now we're seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence that suburban real estate prices are going up. Rents in urban areas are declining. Rural areas are seeing heavy demand. Wealthier people with second homes are suddenly enrolling their kids in school districts, in the hinterland. So we're seeing a lot of anecdotes, and I think eventually we'll see robust data about all this. And people are hollowing out the cities to some extent. There are, fewer people. But I think that will reverse. Like in 10 years, I think we'll be right back, or 5 years. And I think there'll be a different kind of economy. There'll be different things that people are doing. But I do think that will come back. Same with globalization, by the way. So I think that people have seen the ways in which a global pandemic puts the global supply chain, breaks it. And we don't want to be relying on foreign countries for our PPE and our drugs. We're going to have shortages of crucial drugs because we get those from India, and shortages of crucial PPE because we get those from China right at the time we need them because they're keeping them for their own people or because shipping is shut down because of the pandemic. There's going to be a lot of onshoring But I think even that eventually will revert, because I think the economic arguments in favor of globalization are so high, just like for cities. I think these trends, while we will step back for a few years, eventually I think will return.
So we've had quite a few articles on mental health. We just posted an article about community dwelling adults, older adults who've done actually quite well. Most of the surveys suggest community dwelling adults have done well. And it's been an interesting phenomena because that was not the impression of many people. Charlie Marmar wrote, 500,000 deaths, every person knows 10. That means 5 to 10 million people will be exposed directly to a death of a loved one, which would not have occurred last year. Some of these people are elderly and would have died. What's your sense about the mental health of the country?
Well, I look at some surveys by Gallup, by NORC, by other survey firms, and it's worse. I mean, if you compare it to a year ago, sadness, anger, fear, these are all up. Enjoyment is down by 10 percentage points, 15 percentage points. So I'm making up the numbers. I don't have them in front of me. But let's say in 2019, 20% of Americans reported feeling angry every day. Now maybe 30% might. Or if 20% of Americans reported feeling sad every day, now maybe 35% might. I'm making up the numbers, but something like that. We have seen some rises in intimate partner violence because people are cooped up at home. The suicide evidence is mixed, I think, as you said so far. I'd be surprised if it weren't worse. We don't see a bump in suicides when the dust settles. But, there's sort of mixed evidence, I think, so that I'm aware of so far. And it's typically the case that during times of plague, people get depressed. Thousands of years this has happened. And I think, so yes, I think the mental health of the country is suffering. That's one of the things that pandemics do. And while middle-aged and older adults that are living at home probably have the tools to cope, they have the life experience, the maturity, right. They're able to put this into perspective. Some of them may have remembered the Vietnam War, or they may have remembered a major recession, or they've had a divorce in their lives, or maybe their house burned down, or they've had some other calamities in their lives, and they can kind of say, okay, this is bad, but it's not so bad. I'm just going to live at home for a year and it'll be over. But the children, I'm very worried about. I'm very worried about the 50 or 70 million young people you mentioned earlier, and the impact of this on them, on losing schooling opportunities, on losing opportunities to be socialized with friends. I forgot the precise numbers. They're in the book, but I think 40% of American children have some adverse childhood event, being homeless or having a divorced parent or a parent dying or some kind of significant economic hardship or being abused. And now with this pandemic, we're adding a lot of burden to young children in our society. And that can leave long marks. And this has been studied with previous, for example, 1918. We know that some of the people who were young during the 1918 pandemic, which of course was conflated with the First World War, so it's a bit complicated, but that they had lifelong impact.
People may recognize the last name, Christakis. Your brother, Dimitri, and I are friends. He's editor-in-chief of JAMA Pediatrics. Like me, he's a pediatrician.
Yes, we're very proud of Dimitri and the family.
And
my sister Katrina and my brother Kunyan are very...
Now, man, I ain't gonna let y'all hear no more of that, but that was pretty good, pretty good bill. It gives us just enough insight on how these scientists are looking at, this pandemic and how easily that they could talk about 500,000 people dying. But you see one saying by January, here it is, December, we're at 276,000 deaths, almost 300,000 deaths. And, he's expecting 200,000 people to die. You know what I mean? Right around the time that they're trying to do emergency use for the vaccine. And this was published on the 25th. So this wasn't too far ago. This was last week. So this is critical information. Now the others, the scientists were like, nah, I don't think that'll be a surge, but we could break that. And he's saying that because of the anticipation of the vaccine rolling out and immediately affecting those few million people that are frontline workers. But then again, we can't allow our ignorance to get in the way. So we have to continue to practice our literacy levels and make sure that we're good to go. Before we get out of here, man, because I ain't gonna hold too long, go to sleep. Tomorrow I will be having a conversation with brother. I don't know. I don't even know if he gonna show up, dog. But I will be having a conversation with brother Jeremiah. I'm gonna give him another shot at the conversation, and the topic is about, one of the claims that their doctrine upholds is that that they were dispersed. So, what is it? That Israelites was in West Africa, enslaved and shipped and brought to the New World. And then I think he wanted to add a part 2 on there regarding Israelites being on the continent of Africa before whatever period or something. I don't know. Before, people really converted or whatever. Oh, at that part, that doesn't even matter to me. I really want to deal with the evidence of the claim that his doctrine and many other Hebrew Israelite people deal with. So I'm more focused on that. The other part I can show where, I deal with that. He can't get around a couple of things I don't even want to really say. He might be watching, but man, make sure y'all go to familyconnectapparel.com, familyconnectapparel.com. Just hit catalog and browse through. Ladies and gentlemen, get you some joggers, get you some jackets, get you some totes, get you some hoodies, get you some t-shirts, get you some hats, get you some leggings. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to get the leggings, then you got to get you a little, the t-shirt, a little red t-shirt, black t-shirt to go with or white t-shirt to go with your leggings. You know what I mean? And get your bucket hat for the bad hair day. Or snap. You know what I mean? And rock and represent one time. Represent. Come on now. Come on through. Get with us, man. Rock out for us. Get your Mboka. Yeah. Get you some Mboka. Clothing. Man. Mess with us the long way. You know what I'm saying? Get you some KPRT. Kofi Pie Research Team. Yeah. Get you some. Get your hoodie. Fellas, buy your ladies something. Ladies, buy your fellas something. Mess with us one time for the home team. Go to KofiPieSideTV.com. Pick you up one of the 7 books we got on the website. Come on, man. Support. Get the latest works. We swinging. We hitting home runs in each book, man. Mess with us, man. Mess with us. You know what I'm saying? Mess with us the long way. Let me pull this up real quick. Hi, Shawn. I'm showing y'all a little trick that I be doing. The reason why I ain't closed my man. Make sure y'all get this here, get this here, get this here. My name on there. I'm thick in there. I got 2 articles in this volume. Straight like that. 2 articles. One of them, well, I'm getting in the West. I'm talking about West Africa in one of the articles, and the second article I'm talking about African shrines. Yeah. So yeah, make sure y'all get that work too. I don't know about these other books, but yeah, I'm in here right here. This on Amazon only. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, man. Make sure y'all go look. The links to the books, the links to this website, the link to the book, to the journal. It's all in the chat in the description of the video. You know what I'm saying? Make sure I put what you looked at. You know what I mean? Make sure y'all go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, tell a friend, tell a friend. Support, support, support. Keep Kofi in your hearts, minds, and prayers. Oh, yeah. Get you a nice look. Get your pair of them leggings and a little t-shirt, a little hoodie. You know, you can walk around the neighborhood and yeah, fellas, get your ladies right. You might be coming with a lingerie set next. You never know. You know what I'm talking about? With the logos on the back. Sutek, man, you've been quiet, man. You've been rolling up, huh?
Yeah. Night.
Yeah, you too quiet. You ain't doing nothing but listening and choking.
Yeah, I hopped in the shower. I'm getting it together over here.
What's up? Man, you ain't got nothing for the people, man. Thing you want to shout out for with Dipset?
Man, make sure, like Shawn said, man, make sure y'all go support, man. We got a lot of stuff up there. He just showed you everything. We got something for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't want to get nothing off of that, then at least head to KofiPiesideTV.com and pick up your book. We got books for the adults. We got books for the children. You know what I'm saying? Make sure if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that as well. Subscribe to the Mossi Warrior Clan. Subscribe to Kofi Pieside TV. We got a like page. If you on Facebook more than you on YouTube, we on there too. So Kofi Pieside Research Team on Facebook, Mossi Warrior Clan on Facebook. Man, that's how we rock it.
Yeah, man. So again, I'm gonna say, Jimmy Motel, stay scientifically literate up. Look out for the pseudo killers tomorrow. Real Black Atheists on fire tomorrow evening. Tune into Kofi Pieside Research Team and the Mossi. You never know what we're doing on Sunday. Also, make sure y'all tuning in and supporting the destruction of a Black civilization. We on chapter 6 this week. Make sure you get your read on chapter 6 and join the discussion. Be a part of the discussion on Kofi Pieside Research Team YouTube channel. Look for tomorrow evening before Unc go live, man. We should be on, I think Kyle will have us on Dagger Squad. We should be on Dagger Squad. Me and brother JJ, him and his Lions Den, he coming over there to try to wreck shop. Talking about he want to debate somebody so bad. But you know what I'm saying? Me, I ain't even debating them, man. I'm just telling y'all the truth. I'm here to teach. I'm here to deal with one specific thing and one thing only. Now, the other part that he want to talk about, man, I'm doing that for giggles because he was trying to find some kind of way that he could promote himself into an easy, you know what I'm saying, an easy little win, or an easy way to argue his perspective, and get away with it. And I'm not falling for that, man. I want to stand strong on the information. And I'm gonna let the information speak, and then I'm gonna let everybody decide what they want to decide. But when I get done, you gonna understand. And go over there and also subscribe to Omni African Presence, our brother Chris. You know what I'm saying? His YouTube channel as well, man. Support all the family, all the family. And what day are you doing Chancellor? Oh, we do Chancellor Williams. We've been doing Chancellor Williams every Sunday. Every Sunday on Kofi Pie side. Let me give you the link. Not if you ain't got it. Let me give it to you. Hold up.
Yeah, 8 o'clock Eastern every Sunday.
Every Sunday. Look, man, for people trying to get reacclimated to African traditions and systems, man, listen, go on here, man, and watch Brother Ben videos, man. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you watching Brother Ben videos, please, because him and the elder, man, is putting in work on the Orishas and educating my people, man. You know, giving us that real Ishe perspective, the African perspective, and teaching, man. There go Kofi Pie side right there in the chat. Click on it. Subscribe to the channel. Click on all the links. Get you some clothes. Get you some merch. That's what they call it. They call it their merch. Make sure you get your merch. Make sure you go to Amazon. You know what I'm saying? Everything in the description. Everything in the description. Come back to the video. Get everything in the description. I look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow night on the Dagger Squad. Y'all gonna watch me go upside Jeremiah Judah head, and I'm gonna get busy. I'm telling y'all, look, no, I ain't do no extra reading. I'll show you right now what I got going on. I already just got done reading the Macadema, which is Khaldoon's work. Now I'm about to get into Hunwick's work, and then I'm gonna get into another piece of Hunwick, and I'm gonna just deal with everything in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, and the Middle East regarding the Arabs, and then I'm gonna get back into West Africa with this work. And by the time I get done reading the other 5 books that I got left to read, I'm gonna grab 19 more books, and then I am going to get all my literature review together, and then I will be doing something on a topic that one of our Moorish brothers threw out there. He made a claim of. I don't want to tell y'all what it is. I just want to get to work, put my work together, pen my work, and stand on the scholarship. So we're gonna see if what the Moorish brother said is factual. It's gonna be a good read right here. So I'm cracking this open tomorrow. Look what I use for a bookmark. Y'all gonna trip off. This how you know I'm real about that research. Look at that. Money. Yeah, it's a real dollar too. It's a real dollar. It's a real dollar. No flaw. It's a real. That's what I do. I use $1 for a bookmark. I'm gonna make it. You know what I mean? The emphasis behind me using this dollar, I'm gonna make it pay me. You feel me? Work for their research. You feel me? Work for the research. So no Kofi Pie Side TV at 8 p.m. I ain't put that in the chat. You put that in the chat?
Yeah, I'll put that in the shit.
Oh, okay. I was spooked out. I thought Kofi had snuck up. Even though I know he been watching the whole time, but he snuck up because he can't sleep where he at. Yeah, so y'all make sure, man. Y'all make sure y'all rock with us, man. I need to like getting where I need to get. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm just looking at page number 1, bro. You know what I'm saying? You hear me over here doing a little page number 1. Let me end this stream real quick. I got to wrap with Sutek real quick. So on that note, I'm gonna say Shimon Hotep, man. That's the part and peace. Thank you for tuning in. Like the show, subscribe to the channel. Tell a friend, share the show. If you're in one of them discords or family and friends interested in learning more about what we talked about today, man. To this Friday, Thursday night was Science with Shawn. Peace.
Peace.